That going. It's validating. And okay, and then what I
One of the initial steps of the military Psyop program is directed toward the hostland military establishment itself. Since the military represents the government to the populace, their actions and attitudes can do much to create a favorable image of that government in the minds of the people. A soldier's attitude goes a long way toward implementing an effective military Psyop program. Among the support elements needed are the light mobile printing team with its printing and editorial shelters. Also needed is a radio team to support existing radio stations, particularly in the back country. An audiovisual vehicle will help to increase the effectiveness of face-to-face communications. And a loudspeaker team will support tactical operations.
Alrighty-o. It must be Saturday because here we are with Dr. Judy Wood, and we're just waiting for. Oh, we got a few people coming into the chat room, and I want to greet everybody and say happy Saturday wherever you are, whatever time of day or night it is, depending on where you are in the world. And I want to tell anybody in North America to set your clock back, just to let you know.
Oh, it's that day again. Oh dear.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that happens. Well, not today, but tomorrow, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning, so you got to do it sort of before you go to bed. Although everything kind of does it itself these days, just kind of sets itself.
Not really. It depends on what kind of technology you have.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that you have the kind of technology that does it itself, but if you're...
No, I don't want to hope for that, because that means that, who knows what else it does.
I see. Okay, well, just checking
So
out.
if you have a real old computer, then you're probably more free from Big Brother watching, and on other gizmos.
Yeah.
Maybe that feedback is getting louder. Do the people in the chat area hear it?
Can they hear feedback? Can you guys?
Yeah.
Can anyone hear feedback?
It's kind of like an echo with my voice.
Oh. Well, I've turned everything down at my end that I can, but let me just see. Whoa, let's just turn this down here. Turn this down here. I've got a million different things I can turn down. How about that? How's that? Is that better? If you talk, then yeah. Okay, you try talking and seeing if it's still bothering you. Oh, she's gone. She's left. Dr. J, she's closing doors, seeing if that's the problem. Don't let those echo guys come back in. Did you just close the door? How are you doing now?
I don't
How's
hear
the
anything
echo?
at all. Am I supposed to?
Try. I need you to speak so I can see if you're still bugged by the echo.
Am I still connected?
You are. Oh, you are. You're still connected for sure.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Gosh, I'm sorry about that. I was trying to adjust, making it better for your ears.
Well, I just didn't know. It was real quiet, so I didn't know. But I guess you fixed whatever it was, maybe.
Oh, good. So it's all better now?
Because I've heard quietness.
Yeah,
well, there's something back there, but it's not too obnoxious.
Okay.
Anyway, so where were we?
We were when we were off there.
We were just about Big Brother, watching stuff.
Right.
The more stuff you have that automatically dials into, to Big Brother,
Mm-hmm.
and then you worry about it. It's.
Yeah.
So if you have to manually set stuff, that feels better for some reason.
I think you're right about that. I can see your point. We were talking about people like Edward Snowden, and he's in the Q news, and that's the kind of news I listen to. So
But
Anybody
my
out there?
thoughts are anybody who claims to be an insider, who's allowed to keep speaking. They're not really. They're an insider by design.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they want somebody to leak something and make it believable, so they claim that they're an outlier or something, a renegade or something.
Yep. That's what's happening out there in Q world. Basically that's exactly what people are learning. You may know that, but a lot of people don't. So he's trying to
Right,
get
right.
them to figure out. And it's great because it's all about questioning. He's getting people to think critically, to think for themselves,
Well, that's
and
good. That's the important thing, and
not just
that's the
yeah.
only hope we have. I think
I think
is
that's true.
is showing the resistance to that because, as Andrew Johnson used to say, and he probably still does, that I forgot the exact wording, but they will only control us with our uh, we call it,
With our permission.
uh, you know, another word, agreeing. Um, it's kind of like when you're helping somebody.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I-
I'm totally thinking the word right now. Um,
with our consent.
that's it. That's it. Consent.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I don't know why that word is better than the other ones, but yeah, it's like we're part of the program. We're participating in it. It's not just a recipient agreeing. It's like we're um, yeah, consenting to it, like fully aware. But what they do is psyop us into consenting,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the biggest thing to watch out for. Kind of like how magic shows are. They
Mm-hmm.
psyops you into assuming the wrong problem, so you can't solve the right one. Assume get people to assume the wrong issues.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that people are actually talking about things together, because one of the big points is that, where we go one, we go all, because that was the original intent with the first revolution. That was, I think, Thomas Paine coined that. And this is, he's saying they're trying to divide you. And
Oh, big time, big time.
the way to, and is noticing when people are divided. And I'm noticing what's happening is people are saying, we're not going to accept that to one another. They're just saying, okay, we don't need to talk about that because that's just going to cause division. So it's an
But
interesting process.
that across the board isn't really the best solution, because that in a way is what creates a psyop too. I'm thinking more, particularly about my. Oh, it doesn't matter how it was done. Whatever it is, but we just know that the government, it was an inside job, or the government done it. So how do we know that?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how. But well, that's the best way to cover up how it was done, isn't it?
Well, I think maybe we're discussing two different things, but I think what it
Right,
is when,
right. When someone says, "Look, we just need to talk about what we agree on," that's, in most cases probably all right, but it's also used as coercion.
oh no, I didn't mean what we agree on. I think I got that mixed up in terms of, it's like using specific words. Not that we agree on things, but that we don't have to get into these arguments on the side, like thermite versus this versus that. We can actually just listen to what is being said, take it in, and start to process it, rather than having the mockingbird media coming at us, whether it's Gage or whether it's
I see where you're going with this. Yeah, and I can see the difference. It isn't like, it doesn't matter if it was thermite or it was mini nukes or
right.
it was. Yeah, that isn't what you're saying. What you're saying is, instead of, as soon as somebody opens their mouth and says one word, well, why are you talking about thermite? Why are you talking about thermite?
Yeah.
You listen to the full story first, because if somebody looks at the evidence, they quit asking about thermite because they'd be too embarrassed to bring it
Yeah.
up.
And going back to the Jordan Peterson issue or anything else that we've talked about, where you get these folks that just refuse to even listen, like you've got the people who are on side or not on side, but they can't talk to you about what is actually being said. They haven't taken it in to the point
Yeah,
where they can.
exactly. I mean, I might put it in terms of they don't have a problem with what you're saying because they're not listening to it. Their job is to shut you down, but they don't realize that's what their job is.
Right.
They've been coerced into firing back against anybody who wears a red shirt or a green shirt or whatever the story is.
Precisely, and that's been used throughout the centuries. That's the old method. There's a Cicero quote that I would like to be able to do justice to, because I'd like to sometime during the show. I'm going to mention it, but the old thing of the spies that are within are the scariest ones, because they speak our language and yet they cause dissension from within. He says it's better to have a murderer at your gate than to have a spy within your gates.
I used to refer to them as there's honest crooks and there's dishonest crooks. The honest crook, he doesn't hide the fact that he's going to rob you. He's just trying to out trick you to rob you. But the dishonest ones are the ones who are your best friend, and then offer to house sit for you, and then you come back and your house is cleaned out. Those are much worse. It's sort of you really feel violated on those, but you know that there's honest crooks out there.
Good analogy, that one, I think. As compared to me hearkening back to Caesar's time, I think that's when Cicero was around. I wanted to mention that we've got two people from Italy who are both saying hello. So hello to Italy. Just wanted to
there, and I understand they're getting the same psyops that we're getting.
Oh gosh, I would love to hear about how the elections are going there. It's isn't that
everyone's learned the same kind. It's probably gone to the same psyop school to learn how to psyop their population.
Oh yeah, well the folks that there's only a few folks that are doing this, and fortunately, I believe that they're coming to their end. But we don't necessarily have to agree on that. But can't we all hope?
You don't want to drop your guard ever. You don't want to ever drop your guard.
No,
because you never know. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
That's another technique, is to make someone think that make someone think that they've won, and then you just keep on doing what you're doing, and they get caught by surprise.
The old Trojan horse trick.
Yeah, it's someone brought that up with this latest thing with Trump and North Korea. And that somebody wanted to celebrate. Oh, look how wonderful Trump is. None's been done yet. And how do you know if the guy's going to, violate whatever agreement anyway? You don't know what you don't know.
Interestingly enough, for those in the audience who are a queue of files, back a few months, he was talking about North Korea, and he said, past or future will prove past, and he was talking about North Korea and sending pictures. That picture of all the leaders standing together is really interesting because there's meaning to it. I don't know if you've seen it, but all the leaders are standing, and it was taken a few months ago. So we're getting old news, and they're doing a lot of things in the background to prepare people for what's going to be happening. But I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised about North Korea. It's
but still, people want to immediately celebrate. It's like the Trojan horse thing. You're moving this direction, fine. Just keep your eyes open.
Well, that Trump, he's a smarty pants. I have to say, the guy knows what he's doing when it comes to, he's done the tough love thing. If you want to call it that.
To some extent, but he also seems like he's, Hillary in a different costume.
Oh.
And at other times, it's like there's two sides of that coin.
Yeah, no, I would never, ever, as I have to say, no, there's no death body count. He's not doing the spirit.
I don't mean that way, but in every way, but, there's things that you go, whoa, wait a minute. Kind of like, the border business. And instead of building the wall and tossing out all the illegals, like you can just campaigning on, it's like, not only will we let the illegals stay, but we'll give them citizenship.
No, that's not what he's doing. He's what he's doing is he's playing chess. He's backing the
Right.
pieces
I know,
into
but
the
still,
corner.
it comes off like, man, that's going more overboard the other way. But yeah,
Yeah.
whatever he's doing is, I can't control it anyway. So, wake me up when it's done.
Well, I think what he's
Um,
trying to do is getting people so that they can control things and getting them back to where it's in the people's hands rather than in this group. Well, especially with the bankers and the people who are, the Federal Reserve, that has to go. I mean, that's just an obvious thing because it's.
what I've seen just in my lifetime, I don't know how many times it's happened now about this amnesty for illegals. And then, but this is the only, we'll never do it again. And so, from here on out, people are going to have to obey the law because there's no more amnesty. And
No,
then
what he's
do it again, and then do
what
it
he's
again.
doing is he's trying to show that the Democrats actually are being very insincere about their desire to have DACA, because what he's saying is, I've come to the table. Where are you guys? And it's just showing them for what they are. I think it's very clever. Can't say that I've done it quite as well as him, but I've done it in that way. Like, okay, you want to talk about this?
That's true. It's true. He's given them more than they wanted. And
Giving
so,
them.
why do they want it?
He's a real master when it comes to calling people's bluff, and apparently
or
that's his real thing.
psyops. Yeah.
It's a psyops, I guess, if you want to put it
Yep.
in those terms.
But
Business.
not sure that I don't know about this. What do you call it? Import tax business. That's kind of dumb.
Well, again, we're talking about the steel and aluminum, and you have to kind of see what's been done. They've been. It's a big story, but I've been learning about the steel and aluminum. They've been actually.
I've learned about it more too, and it just screws the American people.
Well, not only that, but they've been actually making it purposely having less integrity, so that when the Americans use it for various things like missiles and that sort of things, it doesn't have the integrity it needs. So
there's lots of stories there, but anything if you're going to jack up the price for everything that's basically what it is. I think it's a different way of taxing people and. Anyway, I don't think we're going to get the solution there. But what I wanted to talk about is the quote global warming, the impending, the coming ice age. Oh wait, no, it's global warming now. No, wait a minute, it's climate change.
You've been talking. You've been talking about Judith Curry.
No. Just I'm talking about the subject in general. She's sort of a fence sitter, but she did stick her neck out just a tiny bit, while bouncing on the fence, and her neck got chopped off. And that's so you wonder why there's certain things that are like the third rail. You have to think about what is it? Okay, 9/11 is a third rail, not mini nukes and thermite. But the evidence, what I'm presenting, under no circumstances are you to listen to what Dr. Wood says or let her have a Wikipedia page or blah, blah, blah. And then similar stuff with this climate gate business.
Okay.
And I wonder why is it such a big, fat, hairy deal that they have to psyops the whole world on it? Just like with 9/11. It's a huge thing. I think there's one other thing that was. Oh, the other thing is like the moon landing hoax, or the faulty story. I'm not saying that nobody went to the moon. I'm just saying the story they gave us was so bogus. And but you're not allowed to question that, and I don't know why. But back to this climate thing, it really is a test for can people think independently. It's almost as good as the flat Earth psyops that they're trying to do for a while there. Various alternative folks. Maybe it was an IQ test that they're running to see how people were, how far they'd sunken into it. Yeah. But the climate thing, if you stop and think, not say, oh, that's the expert, whatever they say, but you stop and think for yourself, you can figure it out. Yeah, if you're more than probably 12 years old, I mean, if you're our age, we've seen enough changes. Yeah, we've seen things change, And then if you look back, and I mean that's data that we ourselves know. And one of my favorite ones is the Charles Dickens thing. I think he did the Christmas Carol story.
Charles? Yeah, you're
Charles
right.
Dickens, was it? And it was a tough winter in London. Everything was piles of snow, and people were dying because they couldn't get enough to eat, and they're freezing to death and couldn't keep warm. Man, that must have been an ice age. It turns out it was. It was a mini ice age during that time, and they didn't have SUVs and all sorts of what do you call it? High tech stuff, and you know there wasn't all sorts of people on the planet. Why did they come out of that ice age?
Yeah. Well, that was
Yeah.
I think that was the coal that they would claim did that, and throwing stuff into the Thames River like feces and that sort of thing.
Oh, that caused the global cooling.
Yeah, that caused the global cooling. Oh, they'll say that. I've heard all sorts of
Right,
interesting
right.
information.
There's lots of stories, but they just don't work. And how it is around the planet. But then you start looking at the data, and it's similar to I presented about 9/11 in 2007 at Fetzer's supposed conference that he had. That he didn't apparently pay attention to what I was saying, because later he said, "Oh, she knows nothing about this data." And I presented it then, but it took another 10 years for him to discover it. The USGS studies.
Yep.
And why, you can't just pick and choose what piece of data to ignore. That's biasing your data sample. You have to throw out the whole data sample because it's unreliable. And what I had discovered is that, like, for iron content in the dust, all right, where would you find the most iron content in the dust? Right under where the plume went. The towers went poof, and the plume kind of went south, southeast direction. And where the dust was the heaviest there, they took samples, but they didn't report on any of those.
Ah.
They reported on the ones that were upwind, that weren't affected. And over here and over there, they had one sample that was, quite high. It was on the edge of where the dust plume went. But all the values all the data points where they'd sampled it under the dust plume, they didn't report on any of those. So what would you think? You can't use that data. It's bogus data.
Yeah, well, this is why science, quote unquote, can be manipulated in just the same way that anything else. I think math is still pretty bedrock. You can't move that around too much.
It's bedrock, but you have to look at it yourself. So I looked at that, and that's what I presented at Fetzer's conference in 2007. Is this, this data is meaningless. I mean, the upwind of the World Trade Center. What does that have to do with anything that happened at the World Trade Center?
I just had a thought
Why is it,
on this point. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say it was kind of a penny drop. Do you think this is why the very first thing that they started taking out of the school system was math? Like they started to go to creative math?
Oh, how do you feel about the answer?
Yeah.
Everything that they can change, so it's whatever you believe. Everyone has their own truth. So it turns into psyops. You can't ever know what it is that you know. They don't teach that. They teach how do you feel, and what does other people feel, and let's have a vote. But anyway, looking at this USGS dust sample study, it's like it's kind of bogus. But I discuss that in my book as well. But Fetzer's trying to make some big claim because it has some trace of this and that and the other. Well, that's dust upwind of the World Trade Center. Or a sample here or there, but they're not reporting on stuff across the board. So you don't have an accurate sampling. And there was the tritium measurement. They only made one measurement, one place, or they measured it a couple of different days, I guess. But why only one place? They didn't report anywhere else. All right, now let's switch back to the ClimateGate story.
Mm-hmm.
The average temperatures for the globe. What's the coldest place, do you think? Oh, the South
I'm
Pole?
going to say Antarctica.
Yeah.
Just my idea.
And they have two data points maximum, if they even include them. 2 measuring stations from there. And how many measuring stations they have in New York City,
Every block.
and in Miami and Washington D.C. And they now average, the 2 from the South Pole with the increasing number of data points that they're getting in D.C. And what the average is going to be going up.
Yeah.
Because they taking more samples from Washington D.C. It
The
doesn't mean that the planet's temperature is necessarily going up. There are some, that's a different issue, but their sampling is already biased, so it's meaningless. Yeah, there is evidence that the temperature varies, but why wouldn't it? And it isn't just, and this big thing about CO2.
mm-hmm.
Where's the proof that CO2, does anything? Yeah, the CO2 goes up something like 100 years after the temperature goes up.
Well,
If CO2 is high, that means trees can grow faster. And
right.
I understand in greenhouses they pipe in CO2 plants to grow faster.
Well, to coin a phrase that you probably don't like, I would say follow the money, because what they're really doing is they're trying to say that it's related to carbon. We're all made of carbon. We need a carbon tax. So they had to start with this kind of
Right.
CO2 concept, and it
But,
goes out from there.
whoever comes up with this is the problem right here, that very thing, carbon or CO2, that very thing, the world isn't that simple. And I think it's better to look at stuff like, the Thames freezing over. It doesn't freeze over anymore. So, but when it quit freezing over, there were no SUVs and big and industrialized nations. Same with the big ice age that made huge deposits of stuff up and down North America. Where there's also evidence that like the Great Lakes,
Mm-hmm.
there's an area. I think it's what's the one on the right? Lake Huron.
On the
And
right.
over there's a side piece, like off the side of that, and there's a sort of a saddle in between. And they looked at that saddle and they found there were like if you're going to try to catch wild animals to kill them to eat them, you chase them into a narrower and narrower you box them in, and they had some of those fences in there, and they're on the the floor of the Great Lakes. So in other words, the water level used to be a whole lot lower.
Right.
So that change happened long before any industrialized business happened. Um, there's
Well, that's the problem, is that they've associated it with, man's activity, which I
Yeah,
think was
where's
the
the
big
connection other than just somebody stating it and let's vote on it?
yeah, that was the big mistake. I think that's the part that's unraveling, because if you said, well, might be to do with, I think they are better off talking about the Thames and, the coal, but that's still man's activity. There's always this element,
Yeah,
because they're
this other thing, of course, it was man, but who, whatever, or maybe it was a smart ape that knew how to set it up. But it was this fencing system. It gets narrower and narrower, so that if you're chasing an animal that you want to kill, and you don't have guns and stuff, you chase them into this area that gets narrower and narrower until you can't escape and you can get them there. And they discovered that was on the floor of the Great Lakes, or the saddle between um, Lake Huron and this other side area. I forget what it's called, but but still like way down, submerged now. It's deeper than our records have indicated. What, as far as we know, the Great Lakes have always been kind of there, as
hmm
far as we've kept records. But it was like way a whole lot lower than that then.
hmm.
Some of my favorite things are the psyops, because you got to work on emotions. The polar bears,
Well,
well,
yeah,
and they're standing on an iceberg, Yeah, looking for fish. We don't go fishing up on the glacier. You go fishing in the water, and you're sitting on, if in the spring with the thaw, there's going to be some ice cubes breaking off, and you'd expect to see a polar bear stand on there looking for a fish or whatever he's going to get.
Right.
What's why is that unusual?
So when you were talking a little bit about the measurements of it was the iron you were saying, which basically
Oh, for the World Trade Center, yeah.
at the World Trade Center. So it's almost like if we looked at the sins of omission, what they didn't do, or what the method that they followed not being exactly how you would expect it to be as a scientist, that could be a clue that there was something going on right away. Who do you think is? I mean, why is this happening
What do you
right from
mean
the
right
get-go?
away? We knew right away because buildings don't turn to powder in midair.
Well, true. But I'm just saying that now you've got these scientists that come in and they measure in the wrong places,
Oh,
even though
they
they
measured,
know.
but they didn't. They chose not to report it there.
But this is what I'm saying, the choice that you mentioned that I didn't know about. Now, why do you think they chose that?
You
Did
didn't know
somebody
about
tell
this?
them?
Maybe it'd be good to read the book again.
I need to read that bit again
Yeah,
because I
let's
don't
see. I'm
remember
trying to
that bit.
find which page it's on.
Let's find it because
Yeah.
you know the fact that they did that is interesting.
Oh
Of course,
yeah, that's I made a point of pointing that out. Actually, I used the maps I presented in at Fetzer's Pony Show in 2007. I was running out of time and I wanted to, get this book out and I didn't pretty them up a whole lot, but I used those. There it
okay.
is. You got a book there? Page 324.
I'm just going to go get the book. Meanwhile, I just wanted to acknowledge Madeline. Thank you for letting me know. She said that the stream's not showing up. She subscribes to the channel, but they're not notifying her. This has been happening a lot. It's called shadow banning. They're just trying to keep you away. So if you can let people know by sending it out on your Facebook or whatever, that would be great, because this is happening to everybody who's got a message that isn't about
Yeah, it shows that
something
what's
factious.
important that they don't want people to hear.
That's right. So I've heard that's happened to a lot of other people. They've decided not to shut us right down, but they're trying every other tactic. So
Because that'd be
thank
too obvious.
no. So I'm going to turn my mic down and go get the book while you chat. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. I guess to talk more about this, but yeah, figuring out what is biased measurements, what's unbiased measurements, that becomes very important, and that's an easy way to persuade a public on something. Is like the 97% of scientists agree with whatever. Let's say you surveyed 6,000 scientists, and only 97 of them said that they believe that man-made CO2 had something to do with global warming. Well, then you ignore all the rest of the data points, and he had a couple other ones in there for good measure because it looked too weird if it was 100%.
Right.
That like the 4 out of 5 doctors recommend whatever, and my uncle, who's a doctor, said, "Oh yeah, they send around these surveys and they say they're going to take it as an endorsement if you don't send it back saying you don't agree with it. So if you don't spend the time to send back the survey, say only one only 1 out of 5 sent back the survey complaining about it,
Well,
saying they don't like the product, then they take the other ones as condoning it.
that's
So
kind of
that's
what
how
I
they get
was
the.
getting at about the sin of omission.
Yep.
Let's omit this bit, and it's almost like they've got somebody in behind them, maybe a boss or something, kind of like the stand down orders anywhere. Whether it's all over the place. It seems like that's a bit of a modus operandi when I've heard other people talking about how usually you would have like Secret Service or whatever the thing is, they're not there. And so people are told to stand down, and that's a really
Yeah,
good way to cover things up, too.
the dog that didn't bark.
There you go. You've always got an
Okay, page
expression for me.
324. Let me know when you're
324.
there. And all of those, are following along at home?
Those of you that have a book, page 324.
Yep.
So we've got a picture of the big, well, that's
The fumes,
225.
yeah, on the bottom two pictures, the same picture, but it's the different set of data points. The
All
picture
right.
on the right with the white points, they collected those samples and then didn't report the values.
Right.
And see the samples on the left, those ones, they collected the samples and reported those, but they didn't report the ones that had the white circles around them.
I remember
And
this.
the highest value, the color of the ones on the left have to do with the value of the iron. And see the one on the left in the bottom, that dark blue one?
Yes.
That's the highest iron value. So wouldn't you want to know what was in right in the middle of that plume?
I remember talking about this very early on when I first read the book, and going back is great because you start to really understand things better when you see the big picture for yourself. You're not just having it told to you. You start to understand it.
Yeah, yeah. In that picture on the left, you see it's the outskirts of the dust plume.
Okay.
That to me says, okay, they're hiding something.
Right.
It's not randomized or whatever.
Just
I
wondering if
understand
I can.
that's sort of what happened with the NutraSweet thing. They tested it, and of course they inject rats or feed them like thousands of times higher amounts of the NutraSweet, and the ones that die, they take them out of the study. So the ones that survive, see, nobody died. As long as
Yeah.
they have survivors. That's how they did it. They took the dead ones out of the study, as though they were tested.
I mean,
So
the more you know about what's happening in terms of the world that we think, people will go, oh, it's FDA approved or blah blah blah, and I would never have anything that was not approved by the government. You start to see how they've manipulated things, and how they also put some things through and then hold some things back, and you realize it's just a huge psyop, the FDA, and then whoever's overseeing this study, who is it that
and I was first looking up who was member of is back in 2007. The people who were members of Gage's group. The guy said he was an architect, and then I looked. It was he was an architect of drug testing, not of buildings. And then you think about, what is that? They figure out how to ask whatever questions so they can get the right answer that they want. So that's the drug companies hire these drug testing architects to design the testing to get the answer they want.
infuriating.
It's pretty creepy. So you didn't quite, I guess you had forgotten about that, about the iron testing. So anyway, Fetzer brings up this data like, oh, she just totally forgets it. It's new information. She can't incorporate that. This isn't new information. I presented that as thing in 2007. And I explained there with these exact diagrams why you can't use that data. If somebody is deceiving you, you can't just cherry pick what data you want to keep, what data you're going to throw away. You got to throw it all away. It's kind of like throwing away, let's say they took the dead rats out of the NutraSweet study. Oh, so then that other data that's left, we'll use that. That's good data. No. If somebody's hiding stuff, they're hiding it for a reason. And so you just have to say that's a wash. You can't make any conclusion one way or another. Just say that it's, they're having deceptive ads or deceptive.
It reminds me of when you're baking, and I'm a terrible baker. And by the way, my mind is like a sieve when it comes. I can see the picture, and then I'll go, oh yeah, that picture, and that's the one that's talking about the iron content, because. If you said the picture with the circles on it, then I go, oh, that one. It's terrible. But I remember you talking about this quite a lot. And, it all comes back to, so just for those that are in the audience, I'm thinking of baking and how this has happened to me before, where because I get things backward quite a bit, I'll put in like a tablespoon and instead of a teaspoon. And you can't just do that. You have to kind of throw it out at that point because you've really screwed things up. I mean, maybe it would be a bigger discrepancy.
Or you have
than
to
that.
you have to then up the rest of the stuff to for the to if you put in 3 times too much, well, you got to put in 2 times more of the other stuff.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the times that I've done things where I've just gone, I have no idea where I am in the recipe. Honestly, I have to say there's something wrong with, I'll say I'm in a group of people, can't just be
Yeah.
me. But, I do have to start again because my data is wrong. I'm just trying to put it in layman
Right,
terms.
right. If you don't know what you did put in or didn't put in, that's in old age when you start forgetting. That's
Oh,
it. My next
this
door
has been,
neighbor told writes it off to that, but I write it off to if you get interrupted, it doesn't mess you up. I
yeah,
measure out each thing and put it in a separate container, and then add them in, rather
that's
than
what you have to do.
put in a teaspoon of this, and then oops, somebody rings the doorbell, somebody a phone call. Now what have I put in it? Otherwise you forget where
Yeah.
you are in it. Um, so it's how the architect of the study. Here's another study. It rained here, a couple of days ago, and then it didn't rain the next day or the next day. Now, if that trend continues, we're going to have this horrendous drought, and we're going to all starve to death of dehydration. So therefore, I'm going to order everybody to use all of the land on their property and dig a big hole and collect as much water while it's still in streams as you can and store it. Enough water to last you the rest of your life, because that's it. We're not going to get any more water. That's the equivalent of what this climate change business has been. It's they're taking 2 little data points right next to each other and then extrapolating out however they want to extrapolate it.
Hmm.
It's like we were taught in first grade or second grade, maybe it was third grade, and you draw a graph, and you have two points of the graph, you draw a line through them. Well, if the dots are real close to each other, you draw a line through them, and then extrapolate it out, a few miles or 100 miles. It could be a whole lot of different places, depending on which thickness of the line you put or thickness of the dot.
Hmm.
So extrapolating stuff way out where you don't even know that much what's current is ridiculous.
That's another really good metaphor for me, for my brain, because if you don't have the original information correct, then it's just going to go further
Garbage in,
askew.
garbage out, and then you exaggerate the garbage out, more and more.
True.
So
Yep.
you talk about all these climate models. The climate models can't model the weather more than a month from now, or even a few weeks or so. Yeah, we kind of know it's going to rain. Whatever. But then, if they can't predict the weather accurately a month from now, maybe you got to go to Puxatawny Phil. Is that his name? The groundhog in
Groundhog.
Pennsylvania.
Yep. I
That,
think that.
that tells us if winter's going to be 4 weeks or 2 weeks longer or 6 weeks longer. If
Mhm.
you have to go to a groundhog, it shows your models aren't very good. It
Yeah.
doesn't. If you have to rely on the groundhog, and at first I thought the groundhog lied to us because it looked like it was spring, but then things turned around. So okay, he was right after all. But no, for then extrapolating it out 50 years or 100 years, and they can't even tell us what the weather's going to be like a year from now. That in itself should tell people something.
What I find interesting is that I used to get a copy of the Farmer's Almanac every year, and it was amazingly precise. Now, here are these farmers that were able to extrapolate because, they had to know exactly what was going on with the weather. And, when I was planting gardens and that sort of thing, we would always refer to the Farmer's Almanac. You just pick it up when you get your seeds. At least
Right.
that's what I did. And so now we've got all that information to go on, and yet a lot of what we're hearing about
Isn't
those,
even that good.
that time, it doesn't jibe with the Farmer's Almanac. But I can tell you right now that I'm not that old, but it's been going for a long, long time.
The
And
Farmer's Almanac seems better. I don't know how they do it, but it does seem like a lot better.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that if they can do it as farmers, why is it that the models are so far off with the scientists?
Unless they want them to be that way.
Well, you might think so. You might just think so. So, you can get the Farmer's Almanac online, so do your own research and go back and take a look and see how it jibes.
Who knows? They might start altering it. I really wonder about things like that.
Well, some people have them, like the books.
People are looking at data for the past century. When the record highs were in the 30s. It was record hot, much hotter. If you look at in the past 100 years, the 20 highest temperatures recorded. You look at the top 10, they're all in the 1930s, and the ones that are recent are lower down. They're like in 15th place or something, 16th place. So what does that tell you? It was hotter then, but it turns out that data online is being altered. That there's somebody who would go back and look at it online, and each 6 months or so forth, the temperature in the 30s was decreasing, while the temperature in the past 5 years was increasing. That they're fiddling with the data, actually altering it, so that the story could come out better.
That's why I think some people do have these paper trails that go back, whether it's our grandparents or whatever, and they kept diaries or that sort of thing. Those are really good places to get your data from, because they're real. They can't be altered.
How many areas? I'm in a small community, a small area, and so I looked at the data for this area, and the record hot day and the record cold day. I think I suggested this for other people to do this wherever they live, because I don't think they're going to bother with fiddling with all of them, and look at which has been more recent, the record cold or the record high. And I think it was something like 2/3 or 3/4 of the time the record cold was more recent than the record high. Isn't that amazing? Well, if you have global warming, it would be the other way around.
Oh, and people will give you all sorts of stories about this. And the thing about it is that I would say to other people who are not really scientifically minded, if it doesn't smell right, you need to take a look at it, because I would just nod my head sometimes and listen to people.
I must not understand it, because those are some.
And we want to get along with people. We were talking about that at the top. It's not about agreeing with one another, but what I'm saying is that we shouldn't let this stuff divide us so that we're not going to stay engaged. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with it. There's a big difference between the two as far as I'm concerned. But it's this idea of the powers that be do not want you to go out and find your own information, and so they're creating this division, so it's kind of intimidates us. We don't really want to get into these discussions with people.
I can tell you a nice personal story, a true story here. The work for my PhD, when I devised this experiment and I did it, it disproved all of the theories to date, as of that date. It disproved all of them. And I took it to my advisors, and maybe I've been doing too many all-nighters. This is weird. And I explained it to them. I went back and repeated it, and it's big hassle to do this test. And came to show it to him, and he's like, what on earth could I have done wrong? Is it possible? No, it seemed impossible, but still, he had me redo it a third time, and he watched me do it. He went through the whole process with me, watched me every step of the way. And you got it right. And if people just can disagree on or not believe an answer, and then let's all go watch it together. and look at it together. It's not like you're enemies. It's like, here's what the results are. Let's figure out if the results are correct or not. It had nothing to do with the people involved. It had to do with, is this information correct or not?
Hmm.
And anyway, it was a pretty cool study. He started thinking about more and more, and of course, it ends up being completely logical. After you get to, you get out of your old mindset. But it was never that we were enemies. It was like, let's go look together
And
and see,
that's
this is
where you
weird.
find the biggest breakthroughs when it comes to science, because somebody, it may even be somebody coming from a different generation where they, build on the concepts of somebody else. But can you imagine if they just said, well,
You
that
must
guy
be doing
was,
something wrong.
he was full of bunk, so I'm not going to use anything. And they start over again. They start from scratch. We have to take the information from somebody else and be able to put our egos aside and even our preconceived ideas. And if we're going to move ahead in life at all, I think hopefully we learn
Yeah,
that
it
in our
isn't
childhood.
about the people. It isn't about this team. Oh, the science is settled. What is that term about? That sounds like a political statement.
That is a political statement. It's like conspiracy theory. It's come up as a way of silencing people. When you hear things like that, you can't believe it. No science is settled. And I love to move into my thing about gravity that I've talked about before, where I say gravity's not settled. You can see
Well,
the
yeah.
effects.
What causes gravity?
Yeah, and they'll say, "Oh, well, I'd like to see you walk off a building." Yeah, well, I know the effects of gravity. I can see that. We can calculate that.
Well,
But
somewhat. But actually, that's an interesting thing. They'd say, well, two masses pulling towards each other, like the Earth is so big, and the person has to pull towards, because they're a small mass, but they stick to the Earth because of the two body problem. But it's more than just that, because I've convinced myself of this from Boyd Bushman's experiments. And I think I explained that before. You get
yeah, tell.
magnets that like each other and magnets that don't like each other. A whole bunch of them, and you bolt them together, and you put them in this rock that it looks like a rock, but it's a cavity carved out where those things can fit in. But the aerodynamics are just the same. And for a mental image, pretend you did this with cue balls or billiard balls that look identical, and the one with the magnets fighting each other every time would fall more slowly, and the other one would fall faster than the control. And so that shows there's something going on there. That magnetism affects gravity. Isn't that weird?
Hmm.
So
Isn't it?
but the theory of gravity or whatever is it's a most people don't talk about it, but that's just recently Boyd Bushman's done that. I'm talking about in the past 50 years. It wasn't done 20, 30, or I'm sorry, 200, 300, 400 years ago. It was done in this century. Um, I mean, the
What was
past 100 years. That isn't that weird that as long as humans have been around the planet, they don't have a handle on that. Why they stick to the ground? Why things fall down and break?
that's my one of my favorite questions, and I asked it to my cousin, the nuclear physicist. It's easy for me to say. When I was 17, I remember having this conversation with him and just being fascinated because he's at such a high level of
Brainwashing.
of brainwashing, of looking into science, that he basically said that it was brainwashing when you're in the lower levels
Mhm.
because you're all taught to
No,
sort of go
but
lockstep.
unless it's the thing you're looking at, there's so much stuff that gets assumed is correct and nobody looks back. They assume it's true and then they move on. Like this thing that I was disproving, um, and they actually had to change the theory models based on my evidence.
Hmm.
It's a pretty simple thing. They'd all been looking at it as a two-dimensional problem, where it had to be a three-dimensional problem. The
Hmm.
thermal expansion or mismatch, the causing stresses near the interface of two dissimilar materials. It's why
Right.
paint peels off a house.
Ah.
Yeah, yeah, it's two dissimilar materials, and that's why I got so interested in teeth, because you have enamel on dentin, and there's enamel is 5 times the stiffness of dentin, yet there's no stress on that interface. Every man-made interface, there's huge stresses near that interface, but not in teeth. So how did nature design it? Let's copy it. Let's study and copy it.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny how many things in nature that you can look at and go, yeah, why is it that way? We take it for granted until we start doing some other study and go, oh, it's like this thing in nature, like you're talking about the tornadoes last week. By the way, Madeline wants to know, isn't gravity the opposite of radiation? Good question, Madeline.
In what way? What's the connection?
Well, that's what I would wonder too. I thought you were just going to jump in and go, "Oh, well, yeah, of course." I know
Well, it
exactly.
depends on how you define different terms, and yeah, I would say probably no, but I don't know exactly what you have in mind. But
Maybe you
I'm
can
thinking
explain a bit better,
if you
Madeline.
have two magnets that attract each other or repel each other, it's not like that. It's something else. It's a different field effect than we have been thinking about. I mean, it does have something to do with the large mass, because the moon goes around the Earth and it makes the tides move. The water raises up on that part of the planet. That's why you get tides. But there's more to it than just that. There's a whole lot of things, and the whole thing about climate is just that. It's not simple at all. And I I thought before, until I looked into it, I thought that the Earth was at a fixed angle, because they always tell you 23 and a half
20.
degrees.
Yeah, I knew that.
No, no, it's not.
I was waiting for you to tell me that. Oh, another thing I don't know.
No, it's not. You were taught that it was 23 and a half degrees?
Oh, sure it was. Yeah.
No, that's just an average. It can be like 21 and a half to 24 or something. It wanders around.
We're wobbling.
And it does. And I do remember, I like to use the official stories against themselves, like I say about our history books with the static electricity. But
Fun.
that you remember with that Sumatra earthquake as well as the Fukushima earthquake. They're, I think, both nines on the Richter scale, and they said they were so big that they caused the Earth to wobble off its axis. So from based on that, I'm saying, okay, if it does, then right there you have a reason to have different temperatures each year. Or go through cold periods or warm periods, because maybe the Earth wandered off its axis that causes the ice age. And so why hasn't anyone looked into that? Well, as it turns out, it actually has this variation. Who knows what causes the variation? It isn't that it just wobbles in a consistent fixed wobble. It's that sometimes it's one angle, sometimes it's another angle. And also it can be almost a circular orbit around the sun to a very elliptical orbit around the sun. Now, consider that and how it would affect climate.
Right.
A huge difference. Okay, now add into that the sun, and if it's having a whole bunch of electrical storms and sunspots, apparently those cause a lot more clouds on the Earth. You get a lot more rain one year than another. Okay, that's another variable that you can't foresee. And then based on if you have a lot more rain, they've changed the salinity of the surface water, so there's going to be more mixing in the ocean, and it's going to be churned around, which is going to bring warm water up or cold water down. Can you see that already there's just way too many complex things that are unforeseeable?
Variables.
There's no way you could predict this 50 years out, 40 years out. why not talk about the angle of the Earth, whether it's 23.5 or 24 or 22, and how much that's going to change the climate, as well as if it's an elliptical orbit, what causes that. There's something about was it another planet? How it moves around affects the Earth's orbit,
Right.
depending on when those are. So it might be somewhat predictable, but there's just way too many variables.
Okay,
But
Madeline says, I don't know the specifics. It was an idea that caught my attention. If I remember correctly, Tesla thought it was an electromagnetic response to radiation. I could very well be remembering that wrong, but you'll probably understand what she's getting at there.
well, there's a lot of excuse me, things that Tesla thought of that it's pretty amazing that how his brain worked. And there still may be some things to it, but again, how do you define radiation? Um, is it like the sun radiates and I feel warmth from the sun, so it's some wavelength of energy is radiating. So it's like, what is radiation? Is it a field effect? Is it conventional radiation versus which frequency? There's a lot of general terms, but there's a lot more complex things. Let me jump tracks again back to my favorite example of, according to our history books, static electricity was discovered in the year 600 BC. And also, according to our history books, it took another 2,400 more years to discover electricity. Those two things seem quite related. You walk down a carpeted hallway in the winter and reach out to touch your doorknob, and it arcs and sparks. Cause an electrical discharge from static electricity. The different buildup from one versus the other. And we can probably find other examples like balloons sticking to your sweater, and hair sticking up when you touch a Van de Graaff generator, and other weird things. But so what's the excuse for not understanding what electricity was for 2,400 more years? And then adding on to that, they still don't know what tornadoes are. Well, not in the public domain, that is. Top secret stuff. I suspect they've weaponized it already and have full control of it. But according to what's in our history books and our science books, they don't really explain what tornadoes are. Air, swirling around real fast. That doesn't explain it. It's like a big vacuum cleaner. No, that doesn't explain it. There's a weird field effect that goes on, and why a tornado goes one way and not another way. There's electrical fields. Also, the Earth's magnetic field, with regard to hurricanes, that they might be more comfortable going straight towards magnetic north, or tend to be stronger going on a particular path that way, because they obviously have particular paths. But then again, you have ocean currents, and there's just lots of different things. But the idea of tornadoes, we can see the kind of destruction they can do, and that's so important that we can observe.
Mm-hmm.
Just open your eyes and observe. You don't need to be able to calculate how much energy it would take to make a tornado. No, to know that there was a tornado that came through. No, you saw a tornado, and here's your barn cut in half. That's all you need to know.
Yeah,
And you know that it was a result of that tornado. But
that's a really
so
good thing to understand. If you're a person that feels like you're not up to the science, you can use observation so much in everyday life. I mean, we do it anyway. We do it as moms. We do it as friends. We're observing each other, and we're getting clues from each other as to how they're feeling and all the rest of it. Why can't we do that with the world around us? We seem to then suddenly hand it over to the scientists and say, oh, well, you guys must know better than we do.
To the
And yet,
Psyop manipulators.
it is, because I'm on page 426, because I just hang around this area of the book. I'm really interested in the field effects, because that's a really easy one to detect, or they've got it monitored, and yet they don't talk about it. You'd think that if people on the news were really interested in educating the viewers, they would say, oh, here's an interesting thing. There were some field effects there at JFK on the day that the towers came down. That kind of thing would be helpful for us as human beings, just to start to understand our world around us. Even if it didn't answer a question, it might actually help us to, see some of the circumstances that were at play. But no, that's cut out of every narrative that you have. And that's when I start to wonder. And it's cut out of things like, when you're becoming an electrician, they don't talk about field effects. They talk about static electricity and that sort of thing. But they don't have ways to articulate those things, because it gets into an area that, well, we don't really...
Well, the field effects, I mean, you can't see it. Anything can be like a field effect, but it's what kind of field. And you can't see it, like how far out the electricity, or whatever the field is, like around a conductor. I remember where my parents lived, where I spent some growing years, there was big power lines. And my brother was there with his girlfriend, and they went to kiss, and it arced across between them.
Ooh, that was a good kiss.
Yeah. It was on a hazy evening with a lot of fog. You'd hear snappity snap, in the air. But obviously, there's effects that go out a certain distance from there.
Mm-hmm.
There's people don't like to talk about them. It's like the power only exists in the power line and not around it. One thing I observed with I think it was 2005, with all those hurricanes where they had to start going into Greek letters. Hurricane Wilma came from the Atlantic and then was going across the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Mm-hmm. That morning, it jumped up to a Category 5, and the pressure drops to some amazing amount. And then they said, no, I think it's going to turn up and hit Texas, or maybe New Orleans. Nope, I told the students. I said, nope, it's gonna go by Fort Myers, Florida. It's gonna loop back. And they, huh? But everyone was predicting this other place. So no, I heard a report on the radio in the morning that all the birds left town.
Right.
In Fort Myers, they disappeared.
Right. Yes.
Birds know.
Birds do know, and
they feel the field effects. So why not just track that? Like even today, I was out at work on the chicken pen, and suddenly the roosters started. It looked like it was going to rain, and both roosters started crowing, just on and on and on, like y'all, your heavens, come on, get in, danger's coming. Mm-hmm. And okay, I guess now is when the rain's going to be coming. It's like they know.
Another reason to get us away from nature and into the city, onto the grid. So that
so you're dependent on what the TV tells you.
Yep, what the narrative is. So for people that have the book, there's a lot of information about the field effects that were taking place on 9/11. And I find that really interesting because, of course, that is something that you can talk to people about when you're discussing something. I think you're helping people to think when we talk about this kind of stuff. And it's not like you're trying to shove something down their throat. It's just there. And, I like to say things like, did you know that there were field effects and, that were taking place that day? And from what I understand of field effects, it's just indicative of a change in weather, and sometimes you can just kind of start in on a conversation and somebody might have something to add to that, and they're basically letting you know that that's a reality. And then, people like to educate each other.
Yeah, page 400 and 401, that was the, ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS. I have
did you say?
Weather reports that were on the TV set 10 minutes to 15 minutes before the North Tower got its hole.
Mm-hmm.
and you don't see any hurricane on the map. And the CBS one has labeled as nice as can be. You know,
Let me see if
and
I can find that to put up on the
I put
screen.
the red arrows on that one, but it does show that they have lightning bolts around the like the ABC one. So they have these lightning bolts all around the perimeter of the country, and it's kind of interesting. But the page 401, I superimposed the size of hurricane and where it would be at that moment. And why wasn't on any of the weather maps? So it gets you wondering. I think there was Fox or something that one of them said, "Oh yeah, but it's heading out, so don't worry about it. It's gone." So you wouldn't even remember it if you had heard it on the forecast. But what's with that? And a lot of the detractors would say, "So you're saying the hurricane caused 9/11?" No. Quit trying to jump to the answer. Just click data. Just click information, and it'll reveal itself. And then on page 406, it shows where the three major airports are: Newark, LaGuardia, and JFK airports, and they all reported dry thunder that day. Remember how there's a static field ahead of a hurricane? That's why the birds knew to leave Fort Myers, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
It told us, it told me that Hurricane Wilma was going to make a U-turn and swing back across Florida, which is what it did. And yeah, animals, sense that kind of thing. But it shows that that area was indeed affected by the outskirts of the hurricane. The
Right.
hurricane was indeed close enough to cause field effects there. We don't need to go beyond that, but that we do know that there was dry thunder that day.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, if you added what you see from the satellite photo, then it looks quite different than what was advertised on TV. Um,
Yeah,
when we
and
look at
and
the actual images.
knowing that excuse me, knowing that they like to advertise hurricanes and get people all worked up and sit in front of their TV, rubbing their palms back and forth, sweating. Oh, should we run for cover? Or they like to really get up the scary show,
Well, this
and
is
that didn't
is
happen that day. That was strange.
when you talk about the whole issue of climate change or whatever they're calling it now, but global warming. This might be a really good discussion to have with someone instead, sort of catch them off guard a little bit, but also maybe educating them as to how things are not always as they seem when they're reported, even by TV stations, for instance, because if they weren't even able to get it right for 9/11, let's just say that they made an error. They didn't know that Aaron was there off the coast, even though the satellite said it was. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. Then how the heck are they able to predict global warming and all this sort of stuff? They can't even figure out about the hurricanes.
Or the weather systems knew that there was a hurricane in the area, but these weren't getting people worked up to the TV weather reports. But it was being watched for well, what was it? Most watched hurricane up to that day in history. It had been studied since the end of August.
Hmm.
uh, so they're studying it so they can be able to predict where a hurricane is going to go or how it's going to go, but they still don't know. They still don't know a hurricane could make a right angle turn or left angle. We don't know. If they don't know, why didn't they warn the people in Manhattan you might get flooded out?
As a default.
Yeah, just voluntary evacuation. We'll let you know if we become more certain about this. Because you
Yeah.
can't evacuate. How many people are there? Like 6 million or so in
Well, I
Manhattan.
heard there was 38 million along the eastern seaboard, so all of the areas that were affected when
Well,
this.
but Manhattan in itself is
Yeah.
only a few routes out of town.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's about 8 million or something like that.
Yeah, and so you can't you know what, the George Washington Bridge, the you
The
know, and
Holland
the
Tunnel.
it was just a few other ones in the Holland Tunnel. And it's limited ways you can get people out of there.
Hmm.
And if they started, taking off as fast as they could go, you still couldn't get 6 million people out of there uh, in like 12 hours.
Well, I just compare it to 2017 because I was really looking at things at that point. I was really sort of noticing Harvey and Irma. Was it Irma? I can't remember. There's no. Anyway, you know, the one that was very destructive to Florida. They all run into each other, but Harvey in particular, they were tracking it and really letting people know. And remember the big deal about people getting out of town, and that was, you know, there's way
It's
more.
going to go up the West Coast. Oh, now it's going to go up the center. Now it's going to go up the East Coast.
Yep,
If
they
they
kept
don't
people.
know where it's going to go, they're they should warn people. But if a hurricane is barreling down on a location, you're not warning people at all.
Yeah, that's negligent. And I just keep thinking about how Bush
Unless
that
they're
year was.
100% sure.
Yep.
They have to be 100% sure. They know it's not going to. How could they be 100% sure exactly when and where the hurricane's going to turn?
Yep. So, do you remember? Have you looked into what was happening on the actual news shows the days in advance? Because, of course, I don't remember anything about that because I didn't have TV. But do you remember any of the reports that were coming in, or have you looked at the satellite photographs
You mean of Aaron?
of Aaron? Yeah, what was being
Yeah,
reported.
it really wasn't being talked about at all. There's just the little text blurbs that the weather notes have for people out to sea. That like Bermuda, they're a little bit worried about it, but then it kind of nicked the top corner of it, and then now it's going out to sea, not to be worried about it again. Out to sea from Bermuda straight to New York City is out to sea.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy, guys. If take a, you, I can't recommend the book enough. I just have to say that last week I got a physical copy of the book again. I had lent it out, and it's just great to hold it in your hands and be able to go from place to place and refresh your mind. And actually, I should be going from beginning to end, and I'm just I get
Yeah,
caught.
first time you go through, go from front to back,
Yes.
straight through. If you jump around, you confuse yourself because it builds on itself.
Yeah.
Also, you begin with just getting yourself familiar with the site. Okay, here's where this is, and here's where that is, and it has a bookmark with a map on it as well as a photo to
That's great.
locate different things and handy information like how tall the various buildings were and at what time the North Tower got its hole and what time the South Tower got its hole and what time they went poof and those kinds of things. Just information I found myself wanting to have on a 3x5 card as I was digging through stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
to be stop and just be able to think and ask yourself questions like for me this hurricane barreling down on New York City for 4 days straight, making a straight line. Yeah, because the high pressure system in the going from west to east, it was going to get there at some time, but you don't know exactly when. And the thing's going to turn, but you don't know exactly when because you just don't know about those things. And as you saw in those pictures, that you could see the outer bands of the hurricane right at the end of Long Island. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
close. How could they be so sure when the thing would stop? And as it was, I had to close. I think it's Atlantic City Beach because of the undertow.
Hmm.
It's because the storm surge was present. If it stayed a little bit longer till high tide, imagine that if the hurricane was just a little bit, stayed there, lingered a little bit more, and there was high tide, man, you would have had flooding.
Hmm.
So how could they be 100% sure there wasn't going to be a problem? That's the conclusion I came to. That yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a way they would be 100% sure.
It's really hard for people to deal with this because it's straightforward information. it's a kind of a fascinating thing, especially considering the world that we live in now. I actually had a picture of the Murrow building up there, by the way, too, before we went back to Erin. And you see all of these different things that have happened throughout the years, and you recognize that this technology is out there, and yet we seem
like the Mirror building, and they're trying to tell us that a fertilizer bomb in a truck at one point caused cylindrical cutouts out of the building.
I'm sorry, it's not funny. I just
The ridiculousness of it. It's okay to laugh. That's another thing I'd like to address here. When something is so ridiculous or so horrible, or our bodies, that's a natural reaction to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of coping. That when something is just so horrendous, there's a particular testimony I read, and each time I read it, I laughed for many times. It was just horrible, but I realized it's your coping mechanism. What it was, this guy, one of the first responders, was talking about. This guy came up to the triage place with a leg. He needed help with a leg. It wasn't his leg; it was somebody else's leg.
Yeah,
that's pretty horrid.
Yeah,
but the way he said it, so straight faced, and those people had to be numb by then. They were just, matter of fact. It's like, my gosh, it gives you an idea of just how horrendous it is. But it's okay if you laugh. That is a normal response for just something just so horrible. It protects you.
One of the things that people ask, and Madeline's asking this, I asked myself, was how local news and all of these different people kept this off of the map. Well, I just need to say that I did a study into this myself. I was quite interested, and I put in a paper, which I passed along to Dr. Judy to show her what a poor mark I got. It wasn't because it was badly written, but it was basically because it was unconvincing, because I was trying to get across the idea that even weather can be a way of manipulating. Not only can the weather be manipulated, but we can be manipulated by the weather. And what happens is that the so-called mockingbird media gets their marching orders at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is something that we're finding out now. It's been happening for many, many years, and it's coming to light that, think what you will, but the CIA and various letter agencies will often, not necessarily overtly, but they'll give the information that they want to have on the air. And there are various montages that you can see on TV where you see this channel, that channel, all having exactly the same narrative, like word for word. So the same thing happens with the weather. They say, here's your weather chart, put it up on the board. A lot of these stations are inland, they're not in New York, and the people in New York are looking out and seeing a beautiful day. So this is how easy it is to Psyop people. And this is why it's interesting to discuss this sort of thing with Dr. Judy, because I find it endlessly fascinating that we can be so easily duped.
But so even if you don't, double check everything that somebody else is doing and do all the research and all that, you can still have a couple of spot checks. And that's why, also being a scientist and truly, a forensic scientist looking to try to find the answer to something, and the cause, if I come across something bogus, you have to throw it out so it doesn't confuse you. And if somebody tells the truth 3/4 of the time, but lies, 25% of the time, I just have to ignore everything they say. They're not reliable. And if they've said some things that are true, if they say other things that are really tainted, you got just toss it aside. And that's why I don't have a TV set. But even the weather, like we had some horrendous weather here over the past 5 years. And I really wonder if it's from all the smart meters and cell phone towers and whatnot, why rain just happens to dump in one area. Like one area gets 5 inches of rain in 1 hour, and then a block over it's just light sprinkle. That's just bizarre. And then the official recording is something like 0.2 inches. And then here somebody's shed was floating down the street. Literally. Somebody's shed was floating down the street. There was so much water. And so, okay, they might have some, some right data here or there. Who knows where they're collecting their data from, but it doesn't represent stuff, so I got to re-engage myself. But after a few of those things, you know how much you can trust certain data. Maybe the regular collection site is right half the time. The other half the time, it certainly isn't.
That's why this book is so incredible, because it doesn't just touch on one thing. Because what I noticed too, once you've read the book, you start to realize that people are only talking about one thing. Where did the towers go? And that's big enough issue, but they really focus on this thing of, oh, it wasn't planes, it was this, method or that method, the explosives or the thermite or whatever. Nobody ever discusses anything around 9/11. What happened, the things leading up to it, the seismic issues, anything that is scientific or verifiable. I notice how people keep us on the stuff that is difficult to prove, I suppose, for lack of a better way of putting it, that can keep us going around in circles.
It's not difficult to disprove, but they want to argue about the answer without even discussing what problem is they're trying to solve. And that keeps you from looking at the problem. That's how cover-ups work. It was thermite. What was it? Thermite. Thermite did what does thermite supposedly do? Somebody recently sent me an email. Decided they weren't worthy of getting an answer. They were saying, "Oh, we just disagree on that it can't be both thermite and directed energy." No, I'm talking about the destructive mechanism. I'm not talking about a weapon. It's not playing spin the dial and name that weapon. So, what destructive mechanism is caused by thermite? Is it thermal energy? Is it kinetic energy? Or is it directed energy? We're looking at the type of failure of the material. What caused the material to come apart? If you haven't realized that, so how could it be both directed energy and a weapon and a gun? It's like apples and oranges.
Mm-hmm.
Thermite, its action is usually thermal energy. Well, that isn't what happened to buildings. They didn't get cooked to death. So, or they say it was connected. They actually tend to say it was, well, there's sounds of explosions, so it was kinetic energies, and thermite can do that. So they don't even decide between thermal energy and kinetic energy, but both of those can be ruled out. And what I mean by directed energy was directed to do something differently than it normally does. Instead of atoms being attracted to each other, they decided to repel each other for some reason. Something instructed them to repel each other. I'm calling that directed energy or instructed energy. It's nothing to do with lasers from space. So if somebody wants to argue about lasers from space, they don't even know what my book is about. So it's if somebody writes me, well, it was thermite and energy weapons, who says that? My book has nothing to do with weapons. I'm just talking about evidence. And if you're going to say thermite did it, okay, what was it that thermite did? What problem are you trying to solve? And that's something that is such an easy way to cover something up. Is that like even in the climate change business, what problem are they trying to solve? How to tax people more without them realizing what they're getting took. Because if they're, how is whatever they're going to do, how's that going to change the climate? How does CO2? What does CO2 have to do with the climate? Is it a result or is it a cause? They don't define that even.
Right.
And if somebody's going to, this is my favorite one. talking about the rising oceans and all the people who live along the coastline are going to get flooded out. So therefore, we have to cut out using fossil fuel, and tax everybody into starvation, and all these horrendous things to save those people living by the ocean. Why not just hire a moving truck? It's so silly when they start talking about the rising waters and how it's going to flood people out. Well, okay, head higher ground if you think that.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah. It's
I was listening to Bill Nye go on, the science guy, go on and on about all the people who are going to get flooded out along the coastline because the oceans are going to rise. Well, hire a moving truck. Isn't that a lot cheaper than disrupt the entire planet's economic system? It's so silly.
Well, I love how the very people that are warning us about this are the ones that are buying up all the waterfront. It's like they're depreciating the value of the waterfront by saying that we're going to get flooded out, and then they go and buy it up.
Yep.
Quite a good scheme for Al Gore and his friends, isn't it? But I think that I think people are on to them. I think that it's interesting. He invented the internet, and now people are using the internet to find out things. That's a bit,
Also, get listened to or get watched. But
well, even if it's just
another
talking to each
interesting
other.
fallacy that comes up is about the ice caps, the polar ice caps. Well, what polar ice cap is there is the North Pole? Yeah, the ice freezes over in the winter, and it thaws out in the summer. You ever heard of ice breaking barges? They have the icebreakers they send out so that they can open the shipping lanes.
Mm-hmm. I have.
There's and then I understand Antarctica is getting colder actually, and the ice sheet is building. But anyways,
the discussion is getting really boring actually, because even people that I really respect that talk about how they've kind of bought that the world isn't, or they're confused. They're saying, I don't know what's going on in the world, but they're pretty sure that the polar caps are melting. It's like, I don't know anything else, but I do know that. What do you say?
That they've gotten confused. They're, as I call it, the salt and pepper shaker. They get people's brains and fragment them up, put them in a salt and pepper shaker, and sprinkle it out, so they don't know it from down.
Yeah,
that's my explanation for a lot of things. Like people don't feel grounded. Figure out why you don't feel grounded, and that because the objective of somebody trying to control you is keeping you from feeling grounded. One of the things, that's what the biggest thing I think of this transgender business. Yes, there are some natural transgender people, but that's 0.00001% of the population. It's such a small amount. But why do they make it, fashionable? And it's become such a huge fad that didn't exist 5 years ago. Well, if you have a baby born, you remember it's a girl, and somebody brings in pink balloons, or it's a boy and they bring in blue balloons. What's the biggest thing of your identity? What your gender is. I'm speaking for 99.9999999% of the population. But why has this effort been made to confuse people about who they are?
Can I just correct what I think? I would add to that I think it's for 100% of the people, because when people are having the discussion about their gender, it's still 100% of the people that are finding their identity that way, and they're even the discussion of whether they're male or female or neither is one of identity.
Well, I just won't answer it. It'll keep going out and had to shut off the sound.
Okay. One of those old-fashioned things is, what's that called?
Yeah, I don't know, but this person calls at the same time each week.
Oh, do you want to get it?
No, I don't want to reward them.
Oh, I love your logic. It's great. If you're going to call me during the show, then you're not going to get me answering. Doesn't matter
Yeah,
no
he
matter
did
which
leave a
way.
message anyway, but
Okay.
he just calls at this time. Who knows why? Um,
This might be a good time for me to ask Christoph's question because
yeah.
he wonders if you've looked at Frederick Nygaard's work, The Gravity Mystery. It's on Andrew's site, so you probably have.
Not. I haven't looked into that a lot. No.
Oh, okay. I just want to let Christophe know in case you don't know. Andrew's a great supporter of Dr. Wood, and they're good friends. So it's not that she wouldn't want to look at something on Check the Evidence. It's that
Right. That's it. There's a little bit. How much you want to do with your time during the day.
that's right. And one of the things that I really admire about you is that you stay focused on what you know that you know, and you have your research that you're doing, and you're focused on that, and you don't let a lot of other stuff just come in and distract you,
Or
unlike
look
the
at
rest
one
of
at a
us.
time. Like I've been looking into this climate thing lately, and I'm confused because I thought it's dead, but why is it still alive? It keeps coming back to life,
Well,
and why is it so and especially the name calling. They call people climate deniers. It's like saying conspiracy theorists, whatever they like to name call. And that's a red flag. If somebody name calls rather than uses a logical argument, based on facts, what does that tell you?
well, I think they're really afraid of people because folks aren't buying the narrative anymore. They're not as naive as they used to be. So it's getting kind of scary for those that are trying to push this garbage.
So I could only assume that they wanted to be able to figure out how to tax people differently and control them. And like that's why you have your smart meter, because you're using too much energies to back how you use now. You're up.
Oops, breaking up a little bit there. I think personally they want to keep everything in a state of war and a state of panic all the time. And if we were to actually get to the point where we could negotiate things peacefully and not have to go to war, I mean, that's where a lot of these folks make their money anyway, but it's also a way to control people. So when you can't do it through fear, when people are educating themselves, like the folks who tune in here, then they can actually start to question those that are trying to control us. It's an age-old issue. Look at the Israelites. They're trying to leave, and they weren't allowed to leave because they were good slaves. And it just seems to be something that there's a controlling group, and there's a group of slaves that are willing to do that until they're not willing anymore.
Yeah, that's something I've always had a hard time figuring out. Is why does that give somebody their jollies?
You have to kind of understand
Control.
that there is a thing called evil, and it's hard.
That's how I conclude that there must be, because otherwise, what's the objective for? It isn't like they want somebody to wait on them and cook them breakfast without their having to lift a finger. But still, that's no fun anyway. But it's more than that. It's just the thrill of being able to psyop somebody.
Well, part of it is that there's a desire for eternity, or to live forever. I mean, some of these people are really trying to get to the point where they
Now
can
we can
have
talk
it.
about conspiracy theories.
Oh, did you say you want
Yeah.
to? Woohoo!
No, yeah. Now we can talk about them. Like, are they promised the green ticket or the blue ticket? And
Is that the
how like the ones doing their dirty deeds for them. Right.
uh-huh.
Are they promised a ticket to eternity or something, or or the underground when they nuke the planet, or what is it that you tend to wonder if like what motivates someone to do this.
What's interesting about this conversation is that I would use the same logic that you use in this, because all I can do is I can see, just like with the towers, that there are people like that, and I've experienced them firsthand. My brother lived next door to some people that their whole desire was to control people, and they were Satanists. Call them what you will. It doesn't matter. I'm not interested in labeling people, but they were interested in controlling other people, scaring other people, lying, So I would look at that as evidence and go, oh, I see, there are people like that. And that was a
That's
huge,
what gives them their jollies.
it was a revelation for me because I was probably about 14 and they wanted me to come into their apartment and they told me all sorts of lies about what happened with my brother and sister-in-law. Oh, she went on a train and blah. And there was this, anyway, it turned out they'd gone to a movie, but the whole point was to lure me to come into their apartment, which I chose not to do. But it was an interesting revelation for me because I thought, these people are trying to manipulate me, and I've never met people like that before. That was their only agenda. And they started by scaring me, and oh, it's Hegelian. They scare you and then they say, oh, we'll rescue you now. So.
Oh, I see.
Like the girls that go into the van. I mean, who knows how people get seduced, but it's often, I hear that your mom's really sick. Get in the van. We'll go and, she told me to come and get you so we could go to the hospital. That sort of thing. I've heard about those being tactics that people use to lure young girls.
Underhanded.
Underhanded.
That's pretty wicked.
It's totally wicked. So I can see empirically that this is what people do. Why they do it, I don't know, but I can see that they do it. Mm-hmm. So Madeline wonders, what being or group can manipulate mankind for thousands of years? Well, that's a good question.
No, that's the thing that really keeps getting me is the plans are so long term, and humans have a certain age span. Do they start a project that they're never going to finish because hoping that their great grandchildren will be able to finish it off, or is there something we don't know?
Well, I think that there's probably eternal entities amongst us, and people that they're carrying on.
Or somebody living through us that has the longevity of this plan.
That, from my perspective, it's that we either have the Holy Spirit or we have, there's an evil that overtakes people that they allow in. It's all free will. We say, sure, come on in. And it's the Robert Johnson thing of, selling your soul to the devil. And I think it's a literal thing, but, that's just me. It's a good explanation for me, and it works really well. And you hear it from generation to generation, that there are people that have, and some people it's for fame, fortune, money, eternal life, whatever it is. They sell themselves down the river. And it's a bloodline sometimes, like the Rothschilds and various bloodlines that really feel that they're in charge.
I'm wondering also if it's just, regular people, but something possesses them, and that entity that possesses them maybe has a lifespan of thousands of years.
I believe that these are eternal beings.
Yeah, because of that other problem. Otherwise, that you start getting into your later years, you want to leave a legacy because you're done. And at the beginning is when you have big ideas, and it's different stages of life. But these other plans that go on don't seem like they follow that same pattern.
Yeah, I can see that myself. These are all questions that probably most people have. I just happen to have my own perspective, and it has to have something to do with the eternal aspect of it. And what's the thing that all of us freak out about is, we're born and we know we're going to die. And, I wasn't going to mention it, but my doggie died a couple of days ago, and death is the most heartbreaking thing. That sense that being that person, that dog, is not going to come back to the door. It's just heartrending. There's nothing we can do about it. We're out of control. So I think people that want to control things want to control death. They want to be able to control their own life and death, but they don't seem to care about other people. That's the closest I can come. If I
like there are different types of characters. There's a story we heard about again, I'm saying we heard about, I assume it's true, of a teacher who threw his body in front of the student, and he got shot. He got the bullet. And, he's willing to give his life to save somebody else. And there's, that's one type of personality versus another kind that just, they want to commit suicide, but they don't want to go by themselves. They want to take other people with them. That's another weird thing. There's a lot of weird thinking.
Well, I think that there's a lot to do with the programs that people have been doing on our brains. There's, I think about my mother-in-law who actually went through, they used to put women through these shock treatments. It was just appalling what they would do. They would put you into, basically she had post-traumatic stress or something very understandable. But in the 50s, they would just put you into these hospitals and lobotomize you. Or I think this is what happened to Rosemary Kennedy. She was having problems, and so they lobotomized her. And I think there are other things that they're doing, like MK Ultra and various things. And I think maybe that's part of the plan with the our phones, the smart meters, all this sort of thing. It's a way of controlling us, like the people in Cuba were, driven crazy by the sounds. I can't remember exactly the details of that.
Oh, it was the Cuban embassy, and
Yes.
people lost their hearing or something. First, they complained about things, and they were being ignored, and then finally they realized there's something to it, and they brought them all home.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that are talking about having voices in their head. And the guy that killed himself in front of the White House, which hardly even made the news, apparently he shot his phone. He was like trying to break his phone, and then he killed himself. So people are speculating that he was being triggered somehow to do this particular thing, and he was trying to get it to stop. Pardon me?
His phone was controlling him.
Apparently, and this is something that they're noticing at a lot of these suicide. Instead of somebody having to come and suicide a person, they're controlling them through their phones and through technology. So they're finding that people are shooting their phones or smashing on their phones, or, it's like they can't get rid of the phone, but they know they're being controlled. It's just something.
Why can't they get rid of the phone? They can't they just chuck it in the river? But they were so dependent on carrying a phone that they can't do without it.
Well, I think part of the controlling is that you have to have your phone with you at all times. That's what they're surmising.
It's painful to get rid of the phone, maybe.
Yeah, there's a cognizant part of them that are saying, I know it's my phone that's doing this, but I can't get rid of my phone because that's part of the conditioning. I mean, it's a very strange thing.
It's painful to get out of range of it.
Could be that too, but there's been quite a few of these that I've been looking at because I'm quite interested because of my friend Stephen that we've had on the show as co-host, mm-hmm. and he talks about this where you get these messages that are in your brain. Well, you hear about this all the time and you go, okay, that person's crazy. It's becoming easier and easier to do that, to make people think they're going crazy. And
I remember reading a study about this. It was a military study, and the drill sergeant to test it. These were like enlistees or something, and the next day, the guy brought a chocolate cake to his drill instructor, and that's what he was supposed to do, according to this message. Mm-hmm. And that was their way of testing to see if they were able to convey it. I mean, it's no way anyone would know what it was that what the message was, except for that guy.
Well, yeah, I've been interested in this since Sirhan. Because
did you hear about that study?
I haven't heard about that study. No.
Or it was either angel food cake or chocolate cake or something, some kind of cake that he was supposed to bring the drill instructor. He indeed brought it, and they beamed that information into him.
This is scary stuff because those sinister people that are out there, I don't know why. I can just see that there's some things that are going on. I know it happened with Brittany Murphy. She had a situation. I talked to somebody who was one of my guests on a show who had spoken a little bit too much. She was a border guard, and she wouldn't let it go. And they were trying to make her seem crazy and everyone around her. And people thought that Brittany was going crazy. It's just a theme that seems to run through all of these strange deaths. They start with that, and then suddenly the person no longer is with us.
Yeah, and if the person is seen as crazy, then other people can understand them going into self-destruct because they were just too crazy to exist.
Oh, but it's a big thing. I think it's a way of getting guns away from people, too. I think they're trying to get the guns away. So I can see the tie-ins with all of this stuff, because if you can say a person's crazy, we're really trying to find a way around the Second Amendment. And so now it's anybody who's on drugs, they should be able to have their guns taken away from them. So I can kind of see a theme that's been developing.
Yeah, obviously, if they're putting into, I don't know if it's a law, but it's definitely direct orders from the Department of Education to not discipline any kids and to not report them to police, so there's no paper trail, and they can still go buy guns. A kid brings bullets to school, brings the knives to school, brings guns to school, or whatever, and the principal isn't supposed to report it to the police or discipline the kid.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What would be the reason for that?
Well, this is the same thing to me as looking at 9/11 and going through all of the evidence, because my tendency is to sort of see patterns, and I'm reading these stories and I see...
Yeah, but this is just a piece of data that makes no sense in logical terms, but obviously it's part of a game plan. That's all I'm pointing out, is that it's not anything to do with... I don't see any positive aspect. If somebody's misbehaving like that, or they're threatening to kill somebody, don't report it to the police. Mm-hmm. Why would that become an order by the Department of Education?
It's part of
whatever. I think there's only one conclusion I can come up with.
Well, help me with this.
Help you with it? Well, like if somebody is like the Florida kid. They said, well, there's all these signs of it. They called, it just slipped through the cracks somehow. I guess we need to take away guns, or
right. I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. Where if law enforcement was doing its job, or actually the Department of Education hadn't ordered that. Apparently, there was a whole bunch of times where this kid had brought stuff to school or threatened, that he was going to kill somebody, and he even said he was going to do a school shooting thing. Mm-hmm. And somebody called in January. I think somebody called into the police department, but the police were not to act on it, and it wasn't supposed to become a police record or anything. So therefore, the kid could go buy guns. Therefore, the kid could keep doing what he's doing.
Oh, there's definitely an agenda, and there's a reason why people are being kicked off of YouTube for talking about this. It's like the guy who shall not be named, and I'm really careful about even putting it in my titles or discussing it at all. I don't see
any point naming anybody.
No.
He's just talking about what's going on.
But I'm just noticing that the people that we're naming,
without getting any conspiracy talk or suggestions, is just looking at the evidence, and this is on the website of the Department of Education.
Yes.
These orders because supposedly Obama didn't want the pipeline from school to jail, so therefore we aren't to discipline any school kids or report them to the police.
Create havoc too. I think that's
so he can do armed robbery, not get a police record.
Yep.
Huh? What's the purpose in that other than the agenda that we see unfolding?
Well, I think the ne'er-do-wells are really getting desperate because there are people that are onto them, and I think that they're trying as best they can to create the chaos that has not been working. I mean, you look at the times that they have been trying, like November 4th, they wanted to create chaos that day. There was, it was advertised, and it didn't come off because basically the folks that wanted to stop it said, you know, there's going to be this thing happening, so just be aware. And it was thwarted. And so I think there's a lot of things in the works, and they're getting thwarted at every turn because we're not as stupid as they had hoped we were. And that's a good thing.
But still, if you don't realize what, you know, obviously they have enough followers, because look at all of the theatrics, like the CNN thing at town hall, and they had all these kids,
Total
you know,
fake.
rah, 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 let's take away guns.
Yep.
Or the march in Washington, or whatever it is. They obviously have enough followers to pull those things off.
They do, but you know what happened after that was that one of the kids decided that he wasn't going to participate in that, and one of the teachers, and they appeared on some show and said, this is what I wanted to say, and then they handed me a little card with the actual script on it, and I said I wasn't going to do it.
I think we talked about that last time.
May have,
Yeah.
but
and
then
he saw that the other people had cards that were the same shape and size, so he assumed that was going on for them.
Oh, you
But
probably
still,
told me this.
because this is one person against X number of people. If they're going for a popularity contest, you know, like let's vote on science. But I'm surprised those people actually got on the TV set.
Well, we were talking earlier about what, you know, Trump and this whole idea of him going along with DACA and that sort of thing. I think it's the same Psyop back at you, folks. But put people into a corner, the fake news or whatever you want to call them, CNN. They come into, I call them CIA, but they get their marching orders. And then once they're found out for what they are, more and more people are abandoning them as a source of news. They're coming to the alt media, people who are actually doing their
But then
homework.
that's you know, if that's where people are going, you bet they, you know, build it and they will come. They've already got establishments to round them up. You know,
Yes.
it's a collection agency.
It's a collection agency. I
So
completely-
alt media is going to have collection agencies in it, and those are the ones who are going to get put to the top of YouTube and everything else.
Well, that's true enough. I think that, though, what's happening is that there are people like you right here, right now, on this channel. And the reason that they are downplaying it is that it's just teaching people too much. It's getting people too much information, yet they can't
Not just
really...
information, but you know, emphasizing the reason why we all need to think for ourselves.
Precisely.
And make a whole lot safer world. Instead of going along with whatever the TV tells us, or whatever the first thing that comes up on Google tells us, or the first thing that comes up on the YouTube suggestions, whatever they say, or whatever looks like it's alternative media. And alternative media is very controlled.
Some of it, I think it depends on what we call, like I call myself alternative, so I guess
Right.
we have to
I'm
come up
not
with
talking
another...
about 100% of it, but you can tell the ones that are the collection agencies that are and they become more popular, and they get popularized and go to the top, and it becomes another industry in itself.
Well, this is what I love about Twitter, who has shadow banned and actually out and out banned. I don't know if you noticed this past week, Twitter put not a disclaimer, but a warning on Trump's tweets and said it may not be appropriate for everybody. And he came out against them and just said, no. And so now they're coming out with a way of citing them when they do this kind of stuff. And I believe that Twitter's going down. It really is going down. That's the jack.
And so there'll be another one, I guess.
Well, there may be, but I think what will happen is that people realize that it is a public forum, and that you can't just decide that certain groups of people are not allowed to have a voice. That's fascism.
Well, that's already decided that. I wonder when they're going to get to Wikipedia and deal with that the same way.
Well, I hope they do. I hope they get rid of it altogether. But there's always, with freedom of speech, there's always going to be a forum that is meant to disinform people. I think the difference is that when you have the internet, there's some choice, and people get smarter as they start to realize that they've been duped.
Right, but I know quite a few people who don't realize they're being duped with
Oh,
Wikipedia.
many. But they don't know that being duped by the news either.
Right. They assume if you watch a lot of it, you start assuming it's normal.
Well, this is
It affects you, I think, and changes your set point, so that it. But if you don't listen to the news for like 10 years and listen to it, and you go, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Why does anybody want to look at this thing? That's sort of what happened to me with the Virginia Tech, shooting thing. I hadn't seen the TV for a long time, and somebody told me to turn it on. So okay, plug it in, turn it on, and here's this while it's going on. There's pictures on the TV of this kid holding guns in his hand,
of
while the
course.
news person is telling you that he's shooting people. So do you believe that you saw him shoot people? It's they're photographs of the guy standing there like holding guns, like he's modeling guns or something, just standing holding guns, while the news report is telling you that he's shooting people.
Right.
Now, we don't know if it's the same person or not, but the psyop was just incredible. And I've seen that happen with other things too. They show a picture of somebody, and then they tell you the story, and then pretty soon, did I witness that or not?
Yeah.
They're thinking that you were right there and witnessed it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not careful. So it's creepy. That was okay. I unplugged the TV set at that point, and not gonna do it.
Well, I'm just hoping that most of the people that have read your book or who are even the slightest bit confused about the fact that they were being told something on TV that is not true would get rid of their TVs, because it's just a huge expense that you don't need. And just get the book.
It's
Just
a
get the
psyop
book.
box.
It's a psyop box. So imagine if you had a book, even if the book, unlike your book, even if the book had things in it that were informative and you learned something from it, and then you could go from there and do your own research. I read a book about Michael Hastings because I hadn't really heard about him as a person. I just heard about the accident, so-called accident, where his
Or yeah, I don't like the term accident when it's
yeah, okay,
so
the demise of Michael
yeah.
Hastings took place, and I didn't have the information, so I read something that may or may not have been true about him. And then I decided to read a book that he'd written to see why it was that he was having so many problems with the government, and realized that he was in the middle of doing another project. So you put these things together, but it takes research, and it takes having curiosity and having various sources, one of which was in his own words, even after he had left this world.
Yeah, it's interesting that they I call them the crew, don't like to kill people. That becomes too obvious. If it's a body count trail, that doesn't look good. So they got to suicide somebody, or have other things disable them, or put them out of commission, or a wide variety of things. Maybe they can give them MS, or just a tremendous wide variety of things. But one of the steps, I think, but I don't think they ever really combine things. They choose early on what it is, because if they're trying to do a smear job on somebody, it looks too weird if they try to suicide them after that. If that doesn't work, it's too obvious. So I think they got to pick their plan upstream, but it's different for different people. Let's say give them 50 lawsuits at one time. That'll keep them busy enough. If they can't hire 50 lawyers, they keep them busy enough that they won't bother us anymore. It's that type of management, I think.
Well, I think that's the thing about getting the story, this is what I find quite fascinating. It was Julia Davis was actually on one of our Psyop programs, I think 2013 or something, and she's also an engineer, but she was a border guard. Anyway, it was interesting to hear her story because she was just minding her own business, very much like you, and she noticed something. It was something that she just couldn't let go of, and they wanted her to let go of it. And some people will, some people are more tenacious than others. And so I wonder how many people have let go of things because they've been threatened or they've seen an example of what could happen to them. It's
or if it's done a different way, like, oh, we're taking care of it, don't worry about it. It's all taken care of. We took it to the higher ups and they're taking care of it. You did a good job by telling us. Thanks, bye.
Yeah.
And some people turn around and walk away. Like, for example, what was the NIST report? What was that all about? Other than that very thing. See, we had a government panel who did a report, and it's all taken care of. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing right there, I think, that divides the people who are still alive and thriving from the people who, like there are people after Las Vegas. I don't want to put out any conjectures about Las Vegas. All I do know is that there are many people who spoke out about their experiences and came to a sudden end. They're no longer with us. So I just look at those kinds of things and I say, how many people in history have had that happen so that we go, gosh, well, nobody spoke out about it. Well, maybe they did. And maybe they got in trouble for doing that. Maybe something really horrific happened to them.
Or they got too marginalized that nobody would take them seriously anymore.
Seems like that's the first step. That's where the phones come in.
That's where what?
The phones come in. The MK Ultra. I know that they've been working on that for many, many years. I think about the fellow in 1953 that threw himself out of a window, and turns out he was part of the CIA experimentation program, and his family didn't buy it. They just said, no, that's not what a guy does, and they found out that he was the subject of an experiment. So it's not as though we don't. Then the Church Commission came out and they said, yeah, we were doing that. Sorry. Yeah, we won't do that anymore. I mean, it's...
And then there's people like, who have families. They got to support their family. That comes first.
Well, that's it. If they don't care about themselves.
The what do you call it? Fundamental Latter-day Saints group. They call it the Creek. It started in Short Creek. It's probably like 100 years it's been going on, but they recently arrested and put him in a life sentence. The leader of that group. But up until then, why would people put up with stuff? Well, if you leave, it's like 150 miles or so. I don't know how far it is, but something like 150 miles to Las Vegas. You can't walk there, on sandals or something. So how do you escape? And then that something might happen to your family members who get left behind, like your kids. It really puts people in a difficult place. So, okay, they put up with it, whatever the routine is, even though they know it's wrong, what's going on. There's a way of rationalizing it somehow.
Well, I definitely think that we have all had some sort of experience along those lines. And, I'll just speak for myself.
Psyops, yeah. The different kind of psyops that you don't know how to get out of it. And, but, like this deal with this one out in the middle of the desert, like, if somebody's talking too much or asking too many questions, they go for a car ride and the guy dumps them out in the middle of the desert. And they can't come back in the compound. But it's so somebody doesn't want that to happen to them, so they pretend like as long as they can. It's like there must be something about about our genetic makeup that allows some weirdos to get power hungry to try to control people.
Well, I can tell you one that I've figured out myself about this North Korea thing and about war in general. Can you imagine for all the people who have sent loved ones overseas and they've been killed and they find out later that it was a psyop, which I happen to believe that it has been. They've been perpetuating the situation. Apparently, there's 3-letter agencies involved, but it doesn't matter. The point is that it's been perpetuated for 70 years. My father fought in the Korean War in the 50s, and it's been going on that long. So, and he went stark raving mad as a result of that. So as the child of somebody who looks at a loved one who lived with the consequences all their life, if I find out that that's a psyop, how does that affect my world? I'd rather just believe that he died. He didn't die, but he had the consequences for a good reason, that he was fighting for the freedom of his country or the freedom of another country. But to think that it was just being done to perpetuate the war machine is a hard revelation for people. So they'd rather stay in their cocoons. Does that make sense?
Right. They don't. Yeah. The answer is is unthinkable.
It's unthinkable, and I can't imagine what it would be like for a mom who sent their young child off to Vietnam or to Iraq or Afghanistan, and they had to think that this the powers that be have been doing this for their own purposes. And I think this is what we're going to find out. I'm just going to put my marker here. I think that Trump is going to make a huge difference in the world. It's not him. I think it's that he was placed in that position for such a time as this. And I'm just putting it out there. That's my thesis here. And I think people are going to find out that they've been duped about a lot of things, and about their health, and about all the things that have been available, free energy, all sorts of things. I don't think Trump is trying to slow down any of this other. Maybe he can't do everything at once, but I tend to wonder if it's just a distraction while the machine marches on, like putting in more smart meters and so forth. My first demand on things would be is show me an environmental impact statement of what is the fallout of these smart meters and of the cell phones and all sorts of stuff. Well, here's my take on it, because I think that he's wise in the sense that he realizes that you can't just have a whole population of people. Can you imagine the anger that would be taking place? He's trying to do things. I'm not just saying him. I think that the military is behind this as well. I think they've been trying to, this is a long-term plan, but can you imagine the anger if people thought they were being duped about medication, about all of these things, about smart meters and about free energy, that sort of thing?
To care anymore, I think they make them so out of it that they don't care. It's just noise. Like, oh yeah, this might or might not cause cancer. Who cares? I think that's what people.
Right, but let's just say for argument, some magic genie comes out of a bottle tomorrow, and everybody believes the genie, and the genie says, for the last 100 years you've been, or whatever, 2,000 years, you've been completely duped. You've had free energy.
Say, who cares?
Oh, no. People like me that have had family that have died from cancer, and they had the cure for cancer at the time and that they were hiding.
There is one, but anyway.
Yeah, there is one. But what I'm saying is we know that, and a lot of people do know that, and we know that a lot. I'm just using examples because there's so many. Let's use my dad's example of free energy. He was talking about that when I was a kid. What if we've been paying all this money, all these decades, and working our fingers to the bone, and then they go, oh yeah, we were just kidding, there is free energy? There would be civil war. So they're trying to work it out in such a way, I believe, that things are being put together so that people can slowly go, oh, North Korea can actually have an agreement with South Korea.
Yeah.
Oh, Iran is, able to solve its problems. South Africa, get the world kind of in a place where there's peace, and peace is being exampled, and then start saying, oh, and by the way, we're going to look into smart meters. And
Yeah, I don't know. I really wonder if brains are too far gone though. That it's like it's just tuning stuff out. But I asked somebody. I was on a shuttle between the car rental lot and the airport, and talking with somebody and saying something about free energy. And are you excited? It's free energy. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, well, don't you want free energy? All the energy you want, you don't have to pay for. They shook their head, no. It was weird.
it is
You
weird.
know, it's. I think it's that. The unthinkable kind of thing. That they're trained to live in this world, and that's all they can handle. You don't. Yeah, like you're saying that you got to change it slowly. Yeah, don't go changing on them because they won't. That won't work.
It's just my theory, and I'm seeing signs of that myself, without going into it too much. But I do think that you would have civil war, and I think that at all costs, one side is trying to create civil war, and the
Oh,
other
you'd have
side
lynchings for sure.
is using the art
Yeah,
of.
you'd have all of Congress, and we'd get lynched, wouldn't
Oh,
it?
I think there are going to be people that are going to be lynched anyway, to tell you
Yeah.
the truth. I'm just putting it out there because this is going to be archived, and we can look back and you can say,
Yeah,
man, was she
it is
crazy?
interesting to there is that issue of there's yeah, we know this stuff, but we can't do anything about it because we're just individuals. And when it suddenly is enough people, does it erupt or what changes?
I'm curious about that, but the whole purpose behind this show, as far as I'm concerned, is my little bit
So that's
that
discovery.
I can do. I can
Okay, I'd like to
facilitate.
float another thing on the theme of this climate business.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I didn't want to make that sound like me. I wanted to say I'm trying to use whatever skills I have to be able to present people like you. I just wanted to get that out.
But this climate business, yeah, thanks. The climate business, they're so busy thinking CO2. Well, where's their scientific experiments, demonstrating this, rather than just saying, as a matter of fact, or just throwing it out there and saying, oh, this is what it is, like it's thermite. Um, how do they know if it's cell phones doing whatever the problem is? How have they ruled that out? Or smart meters? Maybe smart meters are doing it. We started having global warming ever since there's been smart meters. That must be causing it.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of things. And why do they pick one thing to connect to? And actually, I've got an experiment for everybody out there. I think
Oh
this will work. I
boy.
haven't tried it yet.
Woohoo.
Um, that they claim that CO2 holds in the heat, right? That's greenhouse gas and holds in heat.
Mhm.
Isn't that the theory? So here's a way of testing that. Get a whole bunch of balloons that look the same. Get a balloon pumper upper. Go out in the woods and pump up a bunch of balloons, and then indoors, bring them back indoors, and then pump up, blow yours up with your mouth, the same amount, CO2. Okay, maybe you might want to put a black magic marker on the where you tie the knot, or have some way of, because they have to be the same color.
Mhm.
Then they've been sitting there a while, and they're all the same temperature, nice and warm. If cold days is the best time to do it. Go up to the second floor of your house and toss them out the window. Now they'll all be the same temperature when you toss them out. Let's see which one falls faster. That would be the one that retains less heat. It cools faster. Wouldn't that test that?
That would.
So you can test it yourself to see if CO2 causes more than the atmosphere. I think that would sort it out right quick. But why don't we have any example, show any evidence of this when they're doing all this big alarmism with the CO2 business?
I think in future shows, we should do this. I will get up. I don't have a second floor, but I'll get up on my roof. I think we should do
But
experiments.
but but it needs to be a warm second floor, so when you let them out and they cool off together. You can't use a step ladder to get up because they both cooled before you drop them out.
Right, so they have
So
to be warm
yes,
inside, and then you throw them outside.
yep, in the cold, and you do it repeatedly. Somebody had suggested to me, and I was sharing this idea. They have two rooms up above, and they could throw one out one and one out the other. I said, well, it might be an argument as to which window's which. So, okay, then do it again and flip it. And so then you could you could tell one from another because they have to be the same as far as
All the other
light absorption and
characteristics,
so
yeah.
forth.
Right. So you just have to make sure that you know which is which. So you know what? I think we should have some sort of a contest here. I'm feeling a contest coming on.
Have somebody report back because if it shows that CO2 that you've exhaled in there, when you have to make sure they're at thermal equilibrium before you toss them out. It's going to take you a while to gather that big pile of them anyway. But if it holds true that it sinks faster than the other one, what does that tell us?
It tells us that the air has different effects. Isn't that
Well, that the CO2, if you have more CO2 in it, it's going to cool faster.
right? So the air,
Yeah.
is it the air that has the effect on the CO2 though? Am I getting that right? Or
Well, they have, they're saying the CO2 in the atmosphere is what's causing
Right.
more greenhouse gas. It's actually, I think 95% of it's water vapor.
yes,
But so and the reason why I say go into the woods, so you don't have smogmobile, air. You have nice, fresh, low CO2 level, I would think, in around trees, in a
right.
nice garden area or something. And
Okay, so you got to have a two-story building that's in the woods, away from a
you can
road.
blow them up at your house and maybe take them someplace else as long as it doesn't the air doesn't come out very fast.
And I think if we just, use your cell phone and film this, I think this could
That'd
be
be
fun
fun.
to watch. I love it. I
Yeah,
love the idea
'cause
that
they're
people are.
not going to float. Helium would make it go up, but the other would be kind of buoyant in the air. But it would be warmer than the cold. As soon as you throw them out the window, I'm thinking the warm air. Because have hot air balloon rides.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that should make it go up more, or at least stay aloft. And one's going to cool off faster and start sinking, I would think.
This could be really fun. We could have an experiment each week. We could come up with something for people to do just on their own for fun. Because the more we can get people involved and thinking
And a
about
way
stuff
of thinking simple experiment that anybody can do to sort things out.
and sharing that with people, like share it with some kids. I mean, this is a great, I'm just getting excited about this because I love it when the penny drops with
I'd
them.
love to see somebody do a science fair project. In like a junior high kid, I think they would eat that up. If people out there have kids needing to do a science fair project, that'd be fun.
I would love to see these. And if you go to characterdriven.com, there's ways that you can get in touch with me, and I will we'll show these experiments if you're interested in
You'll
having
have
them.
to do it lots of times so that the debunkers or whatever aren't going to say, well, it's because you did it this way or that way, or you threw this one out the window first. Or that one. So if you have a whole bunch of balloons, you have two windows in your house, 1, 2, 3, out the windows they go, and then switch, and the other windows you reverse. Who's got the CO2 balloons, then out at the window again. Or I wonder if you could put a marker, but is that someone going to say that's going to contaminate your experiment? A marker on where the knot is in the balloon. just so you can tell, like, here's one's coming down first. Let's gather them up and look at them, and you see the little marker. You
Uh-huh.
can't have a color that's going to change the temperature of the balloon, though.
Right.
It's,
All of
I
these
was thinking like a little
factors.
black dot, right at the neck of where it's tied on the knot.
Uh-huh. Just try and make it as even as possible, like each of them as similar as possible.
Yeah, you can try, and then try throwing them out the window together. And have plenty of them that go out. And so if I don't know how dramatic the difference would be, but if you obviously have some that are just sinking out the bottom, and the others are still kind of up there. If it's a dead giveaway, that'd be cool.
Oh, I love this. It's so fun to have people just trying things out for themselves instead of hearing it from somebody else, because when you see it and you feel it and experience it yourself, you really get the concept.
Well, the debunkers then going to say that's too high a concentration of CO2. Well, then you can adjust the test then. But that, I think that pretty much somebody ought to take it then down to the news station to say, look, see, CO2 doesn't do what they're saying it's doing.
Well, maybe we could make a news event. We could have something on our channel here, and we could have people come over and just have a show dedicated to folks with their cell phone footage where they're doing this. I would love to see kids doing this, teenagers, anybody who's been really psyoped. Those poor kids, they have to go to school every day and have people
who believe in the global warming business, and that the CO2 is what's causing the warming. It retains the heat more. I think it's more of it's the water vapor in the air.
Well, it's been proven.
Works more blanket. Yeah. That's been shown. Like you go out in the desert or whatever, crystal clear sky, and you see a lot of stars twinkling.
Because of
why they're twinkling? It's the air change, but it gets cold in the desert. Why does it get so cold in the desert?
I want to know. I've wondered that myself.
Because you don't have the water vapor holding in the heat like a blanket.
Of course. And that's why it gets so cold on the prairies.
Yep.
The snow comes down and it gets super cold, yet it's bright blue sky.
If you have a clear sky, those are the days it gets cold.
That's
because he gets sucked out, the black body radiation, whatever. That's why the stars twinkle so much, too.
You see what you guys learn here? Every week you come and you think, what more can I learn from Dr. Judy? What more can I learn? And now, we understand why it's cold in the desert. Would you ever have known that if you hadn't have stopped by?
Well, probably a lot of people would, but it's and why I remember in Florida, see, I use observations that if it's going to be a cold night and they're worried about the oranges getting frozen, they put out their smudge pots, putting smoke up. Now those pots aren't enough to warm up the orange field. But the smoke goes up and kind of looms over the orange field and works like a blanket holding the heat in.
There you go.
If it's going to be a super clear night and they're expecting the temperature to go down, then they put out the smudge pots to make sure they don't have a clear sky over the orange field.
This is so good because, I think all of these experiments, you could probably have something for most everything that we've been talking about here, whether it's a Tesla coil or magnets. You've talked about magnets and what happens.
Gravity stuff,
Yeah, the gravity effects. These are things that are not really taught. I think they were taught in my day. I think we did a lot of hands-on stuff. And this is what I do with filmmaking. I'm not really teaching filmmaking per se, but it gives them an opportunity to try things. Just what if about things.
But everything can be, if you understand, it can be simplified down too. Just isolating a problem. Okay, you're saying that CO2 is holding in the heat and making the planet hot. Well, here's a way of just checking out that one statement. And how much has been said about this? It's ridiculous. It's silly. and including Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Oh, man, that guy. I think, honestly, they've really overstepped their reach, these guys, because most people think he's a complete twit, especially when he came out with the little
But
song and
why is
dance.
why is this quote global warming or climate change thing? Why is it still going on? I mean, it being chattered about, and
Well,
people are
there's
called climate change deniers, and I mean, it's so silly.
Well, this is the point I was trying to make in my paper, was that, even weather can be a psyop, because we were talking about media, and how it can be manipulated. Well, I think all around us we have various psyops, and the last thing that,
Yeah, that might offend somebody though talking about media.
well, I was in
I
a
think that's
media class.
a conclusion that we all have to make ourselves. But you start thinking of, okay, if we can prove that CO2 balloons, drop fast and they don't hold in the heat, then how's this story gonna, you kind of wonder, like, what's this Bill Nye science guy saying? It's just silly. Like, especially, I have to laugh because it's so
Yeah.
wacky, his logic, saying that how we need to do all this carbon tax or CO2 tax or all this panic stuff out there because people on the coastline might drown from the water rising. Put them in a moving truck and move them up, inland.
But do you see what he's doing? Is they've taken a personality that was really well known for the previous generation, let's say the millennials or whatever they're called, and they've put him into this position, sort of like with Miley Cyrus and what they've done with her total perversion, which I think is mind control as well. But this is another form of mind control, where they take someone that kids trust and they go, hey, he's the science guy, even though he's not a science guy. And they put him into these situations where he says, if you deny this, you're not part of the group. And it really plays into this thing of everyone wants to belong. And he scares people into not even questioning it. It's not about the science anymore. It's about the groupthink.
Yeah, the holes in his logic are just like, I was talking about the Miley Cyrus thing. Somebody, some friends of mine sent me a video about Bill Nye, the science guy. It combined those two concepts, and they had somebody singing on there that was talking about gender something, with Bill Nye.
Yep.
And they're dancing or singing or doing something, but it was the equivalent of Bill Nye having Miley Cyrus sing and dance with him.
Which is really interesting in light of, you can look back 20 years and you can see some kid talking about, we are what we are, the X chromosome, the Y chromosome, and they're actually doing science. They're talking about how eggs are fertilized and that sort of thing. And you can actually still find that, I believe, online. And that's on his science show. And then you have him, gee, what happened in 20 years? All of a sudden things changed and there's a spectrum of gender.
But it's this, having this female body being flaunted all over the place there. Is that like to trigger somebody's psyche or what it's supposed to do? It's kind of like Miley Cyrus. What's the point?
Well, I found it even more insidious because it's sort of an androgynous person. It's not your typical sort of
Oh, you saw
sexy
it?
girl. It could be a boy, it could be a girl, Anybody's able to have any body parts apparently. So it's even, well, that's just what I saw when I looked at it, because it was.
Oh, so you have seen that one, and it was. Why is Bill Nye, the science guy, involved with this?
Good question. It's a good question, and I have my ideas. Of course, I have ideas about everything. Doesn't mean they're right, but I think it's things that make you wonder what's going on. Hopefully.
And trying to talk people into, well, maybe I'm not a female. Maybe I'm a male. I think that's the salt and pepper shaker effect. He's trying to scramble up people's identity.
They're also
and get
trying to make it so that there's less people on the earth. I mean, that's part of the agenda. And, this whole idea of Planned Parenthood and abortion and making it so that people can't procreate in whatever
well,
way.
okay, I've got an answer for that.
Do you?
Why don't they quit giving people, tax exemptions for having kids?
I think that that's one of the things that they'd like to do. And that's why other people came along and said, we're going to reinstate that. Because, I mean, the constituents want that. The normal people want that. But the
This person I know in China has a kid, and I said, well, okay, when are you going to have another kid? Oh, we can't. It's too expensive.
Not only that, see, I think that when people...
No, they can have multiple kids there now because they've had this other gender issue problem because everyone's having boys and there's not enough girls. But still, if a couple has 2 kids, the population still decreases.
It does. But the other thing that's even more insidious about it is that it denigrates life in and of itself. It says that life isn't important because what do they do when they don't have the child that they want? It's either abortion or infanticide. And a friend of mine who lived in China said,
I'm still getting at it, the point that this person wasn't having a second child because they could not afford it because it's expensive to raise a kid.
mm-hmm.
Why is that a decision? If you want to, cut down the population, why don't you have people decide on whether or not they can afford to have a kid?
Well, that started even when I had kids. I had all sorts of friends that said they couldn't afford having kids, and that was a long time ago. So it's much more so.
But if you
now.
get tax rebates and all this stuff that incentives to have kids and make it cheaper to have kids, it's going the wrong way.
Well, I would suggest that people aren't getting tax incentives very much at all. I mean, I used to get...
Oh, no, part of Trump's tax thing is that they tripled it, either doubled it or tripled it. The tax credits for kids.
Because he's trying to say that the family is important.
But still, it isn't going away. It's increasing. But the point being, if they say the planet's too populated, why aren't they consistent with that? Yeah. You don't need to worry about genocide or anything else. Just
Well, see, that's what tells me that he's not part of the black hats, because he's making a point of saying family's important. Mom should be able to stay at home, or a parent should be able to stay at home. We shouldn't have to be having 2 parents working. That's what they're trying to do.
Maybe I can go out and have 4 kids, and I can get 4 tax rebates.
Yeah, but you know how much it costs to have 4 kids? I have 6, so I mean, just saying it's not worth it.
You see where this conversation's gone? I was bringing up the point that instead of worrying about doing gender whatever, scrambling and to cut down the population, why don't they just not have? I mean, it's a lot easier. Let people decide what they can afford.
Yep.
If that's the choice, if that's why they're doing that.
Yeah.
That's why I think that other reasons.
Well, this has been a long haul for those that are trying to create a situation. Like China's been able to do it, and I think that was the way that the U.S. was going. But most people wouldn't put up with just having the child tax credit taken away. But that's what was happening under the previous administrations. And now Trump comes in and says, because that's not our agenda. And that's what's driving them nuts. We were really close to getting this thing done, and then you came in and screwed it all up. So,
it also has exemptions, but and let people, because it leaves the choice up to the individual if you want total freedom.
It does.
But I think there is something to this. Just the salt and pepper shaker, sprinkling out people's brains. It's just if you get people to, also take destroying the family. That's part of who somebody is. It's their identity and their grounding. And then it's kind of like a magnet on a computer disk. Those magnetic disks. Wipes it clean so you can reprogram it again.
Right.
And
Oh,
I wonder if I
definitely.
think that's part of it too.
Well, you break up relationship at every level, and it starts, family and friends and
Right. And they don't know what their gender is. They become much more easy to reprogram.
don't let it happen, you guys. I mean, I'm I'm
Right. Know
hopeful.
who you are. Know who you are, and your friends are important. Your family's important, and stay connected and know who you and keep knowing who you are. And also, think of simple experiments that can um, identify certain things.
Hmm.
And to be able to observe, so you don't have to depend on what somebody tells you.
And again, I can't emphasize enough having the book. It's if you have one book in your library, I mean, it's one thing to get things online. I do it all the time myself because I just need to read something. But this is a book that you need to have in front of you. Where did the towers go? That's not really the purpose of the show, but I just feel very strongly that I want people to have a copy of the book so that they can show it to other people. Get it inside yourself first. And I'm speaking to
Yeah,
myself too.
it's a course in critical thinking. Literally, it just uses 9/11 as example, but it trains you, or helps teach you how to observe, just observing the world around you, and it will turn your world upside down probably.
Well,
I'm going by what people have said.
that's actually my slogan for my radio show is rocking your worldview, which I thought it's got the double entendre because I sometimes do music as well. But I think that's really what I'm out to do. Sometimes I just think it's okay to have your worldview rocked a bit. It's something that people are so afraid of, and I get it. We don't like to think that the world is not the way we thought it was. Um, I'm dealing with it with people who are close to me, and I understand the problem. And I think that's part of it is go to Thanksgiving dinner and have a big fight. Well, don't do that. Enjoy family dinner. Have
Yeah,
Sunday dinner.
what's wrong with doing this? The balloon experiment. This let's all go to discover this together.
Yep.
Rather than it isn't about I'm right and you're wrong. No, it's about learning together and like exploring the world around us.
Yeah, I think that's why I really agree with the way things are happening as far as the way things are rolling out. What I can see happening in the background. Of course, I'm a Q watcher, and I can see what's happening there, and it makes total sense to me because they're basically saying there's a lot of things going on in the background, and you're only going to see the tip of the iceberg, but just share this information with other people so that when it happens, we won't have rioting in the streets because some of the information is going to be very, very hard to swallow for people. Very hard to
And
swallow.
but it also doesn't matter if other, how many people agree. Let's all raise our hands and vote. Science isn't about vote. It's about observations. Like the balloons. Let's vote as to which balloon falls faster. Now that doesn't going to tell you the answer.
Right.
But the more observations like that you can make, and just in your everyday life and so forth, the more you understand about the world and don't need to depend on what somebody tells you.
And that helps with some of the questions that have been in chat that I've kind of waited till the end to discuss. They're big questions that a couple of people have put forward. One of them is evolution versus intelligent design, which is one of those things that I think really demands that we explore it because we've been taught a certain thing. If you're our generation,
What have we been taught?
we have, well, I'll speak for myself. I have been taught that we evolved and we have these various stages of evolution and survival of the fittest, basically based on what they said, Darwin said. But since that time, I've taken a look for myself at what
And
Darwin
they
said.
explained about the planet and the climate and how there's a different angle tilt of the Earth, different elliptical or circular pattern around the sun, uh, different cloud patterns depending on what the sun's doing, different currents in the ocean. I mean, so many different things going. Who planned that out? And did it just coincidentally end up how it did? And I really kind of think that the planet is sort of self-correcting. Like if something got too hot or too cold, maybe it caused the ocean to circulate a different way. So who knows? It works quite well. It's amazing how stable things are.
Hmm.
But you don't know if things evolved this way or how things got how they are. But you can have there's I don't think there's any answer, is there?
I think there are a lot of questions that we can ask as we look around and when we see that certain things don't necessarily make
Now we
sense.
know man didn't design it. Because they can't figure out how to model the climate, so they
They can be,
oh,
yeah, yeah, clearly we can rule that out. You're right.
right, as well as like teeth. The dent and enamel interface is works, and it doesn't on any man-made interface.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting is that, and I'm not making a case for anything, I'm just saying that if we are evolving, then why is it that 2,000 years ago people were making things that we don't know how to make now? I find that quite interesting. There's lots of answers to that, too, that we could have been annihilated because we got to a certain point and had to start over again. Who knows what that is? But there's a lot of things that fly in the face of what we're told about evolution, just on the face of it, because it assumes that we're at a better place now than we were, 10,000 years ago. And
Yeah, that's or we're de-evolving.
well, it seems like we don't learn too quickly. That's so maybe
Yeah,
we're not we're
or
not the
but
fittest.
there's still the same problems. Like yeah, I went to Jerusalem and visited the old city, and you can go down this like the stairs going down, deep into the sub basements and so forth, and they have these little pins on the wall saying, "Okay, this is where the ground level was at, um, 200 BC, and here's where it was at whatever 1000 AD and 200 BC, and you keep going down, and pretty soon you get the idea that wait, you have a civilization here, and another one comes and mows that one down, builds on top of it." And then another one comes and mows that one down, builds on top of it, like who's king of the mountain this week. And they just pile upon pile upon pile. So how long has this been going on? And they don't change. The behavior hasn't changed. Like what's
Yeah.
with this?
Yeah. Well, it's because we have this short lifespan, I guess, and we always, when you're a teenager and you think you've
Oh,
got
you know
everything all
everything.
figured out, and when you're a little kid, even you just go, "Hey, you know what? I don't know. I can eat it. I can eat an apple. Just the most simple things, right? And you think that you're the first person in the world. In fact, you just go, how did those other kids come to the family? What was happening then? Because life started when I
Or
arrived on the scene.
parents are so stupid. Adults are so stupid. You know everything,
Exactly. So, yeah, we all have that feeling that,
and then the older you get, to realize it's less and less.
and then it's too late. We die. So then the next group comes along, does the same thing. You know,
Yeah, and they don't want to listen to the grown-ups. They know all the answers.
right. You have a few years to figure this all out. You get to where you're, oh, okay, I kind of figured it out, and then you're gone. And then you try and explain to the next people, and they go, oh, my parents were a lot smarter than I thought they were.
But if we
It's
could teach each generation just to make their own observations, and then share them with others, maybe others have some more observations about that, and ooh, look what we're going to find out. It isn't about raising your hand and agreeing with something. It has nothing to do with agreement. It has to do with learning and understanding. And if everybody wants to learn, let's do it together. I have a feeling that the one-room schoolhouse was probably more of that style.
I agree with you
Oh,
about
look what
that.
so and so brought to school. Oh, isn't that neat? How'd you do that?
Well, I think that's true even, having a large family. Some people know I have 6 kids. Some people don't, but I do. And my mom comes from a big family of 8 girls. And it's just one of those things. People would say, well, how did you manage all those kids? Well, you try and do the best you can with the oldest. And they, surprisingly enough, will help you out the next and the next and the next. You
But
model
then you start
what's.
repeating things, and it's got to be such an environment where people can learn from the youngest, for example,
Oh yeah,
and
that's
respect the
that's
youngest.
it. That's what I love about being, and that's why I started a school where the kids were all in one group, because I would always say the kids that are youngest are the less inhibited. They'll come up with more ideas and then the older ones can kind of help them enact it, like help them put it into some sort of practical, let's try it, because they may
Yeah,
not have the skills to be
yeah.
able to do it. But yeah, oh, we used to throw eggs off roofs and, put them in various things, powder and that sort of thing to see whether they'd break. You know, Actually, people thought my house was kind of crazy. So,
Yeah, it's just learning how to try things out and observe things is what it's all about. I don't that I think has been taken out of school systems.
yeah. And so it's not as though they don't know that these things work. I think it's that there's some deliberate dumbing down going on. Just my
Oh
observation.
yeah, because they don't want people to be able to figure the way out of a wet paper bag. So they can capture you in a wet paper bag and you wouldn't know how to get out. But seriously, yeah, this would be fun to see who comes up with the balloon experiment and how it goes. If somebody has a junior high kid who likes to do stuff, that would be really fun to do too.
Yeah, and everyone's got a cell phone. It's not like you can't record this stuff. It's,
No, I mean, why it'd be so exciting for a junior high kid because they could put it at the science fair and see what the judges say.
yeah, they probably won't get it. The judges will go, what? Because they've,
Well, that can't be right. Well, look at this video here. How do you explain this?
most of the judges are now in their 20s and 30s, and they were part of the dumbing down, part of the Bill Nye generation, I suppose. But
I did some judging of science fair when I was a faculty member, and it was kind of surprising how clueless some of the kids were. And then try to help clue them in, give them some hints to see if you could get them to figure something out. And yeah, it was too bad.
well, what was too bad? That you're not.
Well, I just couldn't. I probably shouldn't say anything bad, but it was the um, the lack of understanding of the world around them was just astonishing.
Well, one of the things I want to do is to do my filmmaking workshops online and to try and incorporate other people, like yourself or various people to come in and be resource people. I talk about that. I don't
Yeah,
use,
have them do a filmmaking thing with this balloon experiment.
well,
I
that's what
want to
I'm
get more people
thinking.
doing that. But I keep assuming that this climate change business is kind of like the mini nukes thing. Kill it and then it pops back up again. And you kill it again, it pops back up again, like an Energizer bunny.
Well, now it's just been kind of enshrined in our thinking, because I was speaking to a friend the other day and he said something about, well, if only they could do this and that and the other thing about the ice cap and the fact that it's melting. And he just said it as though I would kind of go along with it.
But wait
And
till winter.
and I said, where? I said sort of the same thing. I said, where are you getting, what part of the Arctic? Because he said the Arctic. And a friend of mine has lived up there, so I just wanted to know.
Oh,
What,
I know where he's coming from. I'm sorry, I'm being a
yeah,
little bit silly. Outside of Las Vegas, there's this community. I don't know if it's still the same or not, as golf course. where they have lakes and waterfalls and green grass for people who like to play golf. In the middle of the desert, with desert all around them, and who knows how much they have to pipe in water from wherever to water that grass and to have the lakes and stuff, because this is really dry desert air.
Mm-hmm.
That lake's going to evaporate real fast if they don't keep piping water in.
Yeah.
And so it's I wonder if that's where he's from, like wanting to next to want to put palm trees on the North Pole or the South Pole, or
Well,
it's like just live with the environment the way it is. It takes care of itself, obviously. That's what history has shown.
well, that's a really good one too. I like that analogy because you could say a person that visited, say, Palm Springs. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but I know that that's one of those golfing places.
Just outside of Las Vegas on Tonopah Highway, it's this. I can send you the link to it. From the satellite image, it's just this green golf course with
Sure. Well,
lakes
there are
and stuff in it.
places like that. Like there's places like that in Nevada and various other places too. So if you were to be taking, pictures in that area and you said, gosh, this is what the environment is like here in the desert, because you took a picture of a certain area, you could really psyop somebody. You could say, this is what the desert looks like. And then they go off 10 miles and they go, well, how come it's dry over here? So I think it's the same thing for the North Pole. There's...
Well, it was the same thing as it was saying, okay, a couple days ago it rained, that it hasn't rained since. So therefore, if that trend continues, we're in this horrendous drought. We're going to die of dehydration.
Mm-hmm.
That's a time scale one, but it's like the polar bears on the ice. Don't they eat fish? They dive in the water. They go swimming. So why wouldn't they be on an iceberg looking in? When they're going to go get fish?
Well, and I just want statistics as well. I guess I've just come to that point in my life where I just say, if you're going to show me something general like that, then I'd at least like to have some reference. Just give me some citation that I can go look at. And it's not even, I'm not trying to be argumentative or whatever. Well, could you just show me where you read that? But what I find is that it's pass the word. That's that little game that we used to play at parties where you pass the word along. And there's at the end of the...
They're talking points. Just
They're talking points. And so if you just kindly ask somebody, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Can you tell me where you found that out? And I'll take a look myself. It's not argumentative, and I think it's very prudent. I think the person should respect you for wanting to follow
otherwise, someone could say that Godzilla lives in New York City, or whatever. What was that name of that creature? The big King Kong. So King Kong lives in New York City. I saw it on the TV.
I watch the channel where people are doing analysis, and they call it the sauce, and they won't look at anything until somebody gives them the sauce, which is really the source information. And they have this whole group of people that's vetting it to see where it comes from, and to try and coordinate other. And it's really great to watch, because people will throw out all sorts of ideas, and they'll say, well, give me the sauce. And it's just a fun way of saying it. So that's another thing that you could maybe incorporate. Oh, give me the sauce. Where'd you get that? It's I found it quite fun to watch, because it's really teaching people that they have to be able to provide some sort of backing. They can't just throw things out willy-nilly.
Yeah, somebody heard this from that, or that it all becomes this rumor mill.
So much more fun when you can do your research. It's so much fun. I'm actually putting together a website. It's just a bunch of files. You know how you can do that with Pocket or something. You see a good file and you put it. And sometimes I can't read things right away, but it catches my eye. So I put it in there so I can read it later. And it's a fun way to sort of amalgamate a bunch of stuff so that you can have resources and you can show them to people. If you find something interesting, you can sort of have it right there in one place. Just for fun. That's my idea of fun. Anyway, well,
it looks like the lake is still there. I found it.
the link to
The lake at the golf course.
Oh, do you want to share your
Let's see if
screen?
I can. And you can. I'll let you zoom in on it when it comes up. I've got too many windows open, so it's going to take a while to get the.
So you're going to screen share. I have to open up another thing here.
Oh, I don't know if I need a screen share. Can I just give it to you?
Oh, sure.
The link. Because my computer is going really slowly right now. It needs to a reboot. It's.
I have to
So
say, I've had fun
I'm still
today.
waiting for the Zoom window to open. I'm still waiting.
It's not that I don't feel like it's fun every day, but it's. I would love to have even more people come in. Madeline, you need to come into the room and chat, so it's not just my boring voice. You can ask questions and chit chat. I'd like to make it more that way. I've created a room, the recovery room, I call it. And all I need is your email address, and I don't know if you want to dox yourself, but if you go onto characterdriven.com, trying to find ways to do this without having to have the email address. And I think what you can do is you can join without me inviting you. I can just give you the way to join and then use a username. I think you can do that. But the worst case scenario, you can get an email address that you use for online. And that's all you need to be able to come into the room. So just throwing that out while Dr. Judy's looking for her link.
Well, I've got the link.
Oh.
I'm still trying to get the, let's see, maybe Skype is faster at opening up.
Okay.
It'll be a race.
We're using a different technology here. It's not that secret. I'm using Zoom rather than Skype. And the cool thing about it is that you can share screens, you can talk with a group of people, and I'm going to be using it for some of the, well, whether it's filmmaking workshops or other types of workshops that I have online. It would be just the ability to be in the room and to be able to talk. Oh, there we go. Just a sec.
Oh, that worked. Okay, the other window hasn't come up yet, so I'll leave that alone. So if
Okay.
you zoom out, you can see more stuff. It looks like they don't have the grass in between, but look at the lakes.
Just a sec.
There's one a little bit to the right of
Well,
there.
Okay, I got to open it on my other computer because this one, I have this really, really silly old computer, and it just starts filling it in. Sorry, it's gone crazy. Okay, I got to open it on the other computer. Madeline says she'd love that. So Madeline, message me on Character Driven.
If you love the link,
It's
it
easy.
used to have more green stuff there, but it still has the lakes. I think they had to, because of the water shortage, they had to cut back on watering. They just have the putting greens there, but they still have the lakes there. A couple
I'm
lakes.
just opening Skype on another computer. Sorry.
Oh, there's at least 4 lakes there. I mean, these don't exist in nature. 5 lakes.
Do you know what Dr. Judy and I have done before? After Fukushima, Dr. Judy took me on a tour of Fukushima. Well, no, some of the other areas. We were looking on Google Earth, and we were sort of noticing, what were we doing? We were looking at videos and that sort of thing, and zooming in on different places. We should do that
I don't
sometime.
have to go look at stuff that somebody's talking about, but sometimes I go on vacation. I go to around the Cook Islands or the South Pacific, and see what buildings you can see there. Oh, I know where we went. We went to what do you call it? Midway Island.
Yeah, we went on vacation together.
We went to Midway Island. They've closed it down, but you can see all the old military housing stuff. So have you gotten the piece yet?
It's coming up.
I think I counted 8 lakes there. 1,
Still coming
2,
Oh, there we go.
3,
Okay.
4, 5.
Let me just
Yeah, I counted 8 lakes
people
there.
see this. Okay. There you go, folks.
And if you zoom out, you see kind of how it is. But why? Why?
Okay. This is the Oh gosh. Yeah, can you imagine how much water that takes?
You've seen it? If you zoom out or you look in
I've zoomed
further?
out. Yep. And it's
It's
huge.
in the middle of the desert. There's this, so, if somebody's going to use this picture and say, look at the drought, look at, all of it's just turned desert all around this place. It used to be all green like this. You could come
Good
up with some
point.
kind of story there.
Hey, why don't we have the Psyop recovery program where it's actually we'll Psyop people. We'll just show a bunch of pictures and say, did you know that there's a big drought happening? Well, of course, people know there's a
Well, you
drought
can
happening in
you can
California.
look at the street view of it, and let's see. Do we have it over on the other side of the road? I don't know where. Oh, I went down the
We have
wrong
to go in a
place.
little bit. These poor people are having to watch me zooming in and out.
All right, I got to the parking lot.
You got to the parking lot?
Yeah, I'm on Street View. You can get to the parking lot.
So you got to keep
Of
zooming
it.
in because I zoomed out.
Oh, they have party rentals, but you can't really see
Sorry.
the.
Let's go. Party rentals.
Oh, there now I can see the green stuff. It's one stretch there. I was looking for the lakes, but you see, from the overhead zoomed out view. Look at all the lakes.
Yeah,
That's a lot of water.
my problem is getting close enough in. Yeah, there we go.
Why don't they just use sand traps?
Because they don't have to. They have money.
Oh, they do. They do have sand traps, but they have they have all this.
But they don't. They want to keep the sand out of their shoes.
Yeah, this overhead shot looks like it was filmed when they were under water restriction.
It
But
reminds me of the film Chinatown, which I went to see my first date with my husband when I was a kid, and he takes me to see Chinatown, and I don't think I understood it then, but it was all about the water supply in They were trying to divert the water supply to do stuff like this, and apparently it's still happening. Well, you know what? I think as much as people want to see the golf courses of Southern California,
desert.
that's another episode. The golf courses of Southern California with Dr. Judy Wood.
Of Nevada. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Southern-
Nevada. Yes,
But this is
I
out.
wouldn't be a good host for
This has
this.
been there a while, and the city is grown, but it hasn't grown out to that. It's out in the boondocks, and they have some hotels that have big waterfalls and other things.
Yep.
But okay, they're trying to draw people in, but yeah, that's a huge golf course.
It is a huge golf course. It's crazy. Yeah, and
You can put the link up on the in the text part of the show, so other people can go see it if they want to.
easy for you to say. It's on a different computer. Let me just see what I can do here. You guys can actually probably find it just by looking. What's the name of this place? This is really good, though. Show it to people who are talking about the pictures that they've seen, because you can convince people
You
of
can
anything.
put all sorts of stories with this one. You can have a polar bear on a piece of styrofoam in the middle of that lake too, and see it's turned to desert all around him.
I'm trying to find the sign. I think it's over this way. Oh, there it is.
Which
Las Vegas Paute Golf Resort.
uh,
Paute. Paute.
it sounds like an Indian name.
Paiute. It's probably Paiute.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I don't think they're enlarging it. Maybe they're going to. It looks like to the left of the picture you started. It was.
I have to
You
say,
could-
this is one of Dr. Judy's favorite things. She likes to take Google Maps and
Go
hone in on
visit
different
places.
places. Yeah. So you say,
That's it.
oh, I'd really like to know what's going on over there. And well, I think we were just talking about the tsunami.
Wherever it has like the what do you call it, the hot car death in Atlanta, where the guy supposedly forgot his child in the car.
Right.
And so I went to Google. Okay, here he comes out of the Chick-fil-A. He gets in the car, and as soon as you pull out in the main road, you got to get in the left turn lane to take the kid to daycare. I mean, the kid doesn't have time to fall asleep. He supposedly forgot to turn at daycare and go straight ahead, but the kid cannot be asleep. You just put him in, as soon as you pull out of the parking lot. You know, you're unless you end up looping around to get in that way. I don't
This
know
is
if it's a illegal
such a great
turn.
way to investigate things because you can go so close and you can. This is what George Webb does quite a bit.
Yeah, I went to okay, here's he gets in his car and he's starting to leave, and he's going to pull out in the main drag there because you're going through the whatever you call it, street view, and he's going to turn right. Well, wait, he's looking over his right shoulder. He should see the kid there. Why doesn't he see hey, he turned right to get in the parking lot. Does he look to the right and see, to see where he's driving the car? If you turn to the right, you see the kid.
And you
So
wonder how she figured out 9/11. You wonder. It's all through this kind of mind. The things that totally pass us by. I really enjoy watching the news sometimes when they give you details that don't make sense, and you kind of go, and then they have to go back on that because they realize that people have figured it out. They just go, yeah, but yeah.
yeah, but my favorite one, like being a data collector, I was recording 9/11 as it was going on, and so it was sampling different stations that I was recording. So here it is, Bryant Gumbel saying, "Oh, we're getting the very first pictures from the Pentagon," and you see the picture on the screen. And he goes, "Oh, that must be near the Pentagon. It's not the Pentagon. That must be near the Pentagon." No, it was the Pentagon. It just didn't have any damage in it. The roof hadn't fallen down yet. He didn't see any damage, so he said it must be near the Pentagon.
Right.
But that was cool hearing him say, live, saying that.
Again,
That must be a building near the Pentagon.
things that often go over people's heads that they don't notice. They just take it in. I think that's the whole thing, is that people don't ask questions. They
Or
just listen
observe,
to that.
for themselves. They're just recording a list of talking points in their mind. Like, what's the answer I need to memorize, to get it on the test? They don't look at the actual events.
And do you think that people just kind of politely say, oh, I must be wrong because he just said that? And we have this thing about authority that we're convinced that
98% of scientists agree that whatever, and the science is settled. When you say the science is settled, it means, man, it's like, thou shalt not vote again.
right.
It's like the NutraSweet test where they took the dead rats out of the sampling.
Yeah.
They didn't include those, so 100% of the rats survived. And that was one rat. I'm being silly here, but it probably was something like that. So 100% of the rats survived if there's one survivor.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Madeline says there's no critical filter, and I think that's part of it. I find myself doing the same thing. Somebody says a plane crashed into this building, or say whatever it is. I can't think of the last time this happened, but I know it has happened where I've just gone, I don't see any plane parts, but it must be me. It has to be. And maybe it's because we watch a film. They've already got us softened up, but they show us a film where there's no plane parts, and they've explained it already, and so we just go, oh, it must be just like that film that I saw.
And they have a way of explaining it. They just, they have an answer, so you don't need to ask a question anymore. And that's another typical thing that humans do, is they ask questions till they're given an answer, then they quit asking the question. Doesn't matter if the answer makes sense. And that was my example with George Stephanopoulos. And Peter Jennings said, where did all the rubble go? Well, I've been asking folks that. One volunteer, Robert Gerlinsky, explained it all fell down into the ground, was pulverized, evaporated. Yeah. And then he goes on to talk about something else. It's evaporated? The building evaporated?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
people
but it was an answer. So then you can move on if you have an answer. And I think that's a typical human response. That okay, there's the answer. Like, oh, the building collapsed. Isn't that building turned to dust? And then here, look, you see the building collapse. Oh, okay, the building collapsed. Now I know. Then go on. And then people quit noticing that the building turned to powder in midair.
right.
So get away from talking points. When people come up with their list of talking points to argue something, and they machine gun fire talking points at you, you know that's somebody who's not in control of their own thinking. Stand
Yeah,
on orders,
yeah.
put options. All steel shipped to China. Steel-toed boots were melting. And somebody, Jane Stanley from BBC said the building 7 was going to collapse before it did. And they have their list of talking points. They just fire them out. They memorized. There's no thought going on in there. That's just a memorized list of talking points.
Mm-hmm.
And George Bush's cousins, uncles, whatever, his dog said something was somewhere. Okay, what does that have to do with what happened to the building?
And we know what story he was reading when he was in the elementary school.
Yeah, so and then he was holding the book upside down. So what does that have to do with what happened to the building? They don't realize that doesn't answer the question. It isn't a scientific process.
So it's not that difficult to engage in conversation as long as we're being respectful. I think one of the problems that I've had in the past and may still do is when if you do feel the slightest bit insecure yourself, you might tend to come on a little bit too strong. And I find that the more confident that I get about, you don't have to push. And so you can just sit back a little bit and listen to what people have to say and find out what their viewpoint is. And if you have enough information, you're able to begin questioning.
There's a lot of people. Well, I know it was thermite. Okay, what was it?
Yeah, that kind of question. Exactly. That's one of the things that I'm really noticing now, that people will say, they'll make statements like that. I'm trying to remember. Somebody said, my daughter has been teaching my granddaughter about 9/11, and she came over to my house and she had it all figured out and she was telling me everything. She's really red-pilled, and I thought, I'm really curious about what that girl has been taught, because now she's got all the talking points. She was able to come over. That's what the grandma said. She came over and she was able to give me all the facts point by point.
No, and the melting point of steel is whatever. What does it have to do with what happened to the building?
Yeah. It's
what problem are they trying to solve? But it's interesting that the followers of this, they're given the list of talking points, and they swallow it and spit it out, and they assume that somehow answers a question. And I think, media does sort of the same thing. Like, what was George Stephanopoulos doing? And where'd all the rubble go? They evaporated. Well, can you show me how it evaporates? Or but they weren't going to get into a big thing there. But what it does capture is that this documentation that even the media people noticed there was a lack of material on the ground. That's the useful part of that.
I want to let people know that I'm trying to organize things over at the original place that we were streaming before YouTube allowed us to do this was on live stream / character driven. Surprise, surprise. So it's pretty easy to find. And what I'm noticing is that I kept quite a repository there. It's not exactly organized, but you can find some of the shows that we were doing quite a few years ago when we weren't quite as restricted by what we could show. I get a copyright / every time we do this show. So I've kind of kept it to whatever's on Dr. Judy's website, and Google Maps, I think, are okay. I've tried to keep it to news stories and that sort of thing.
That's why it's important to give a link at the bottom so that, you're giving your source.
That's true, except it seems that they seem to have a bit of an agenda with certain people right now, and So I'm trying to
right.
keep a clean nose on YouTube,
Yeah.
which is why the
Oh,
even
so the link might, if you paste the link into the description, that might cause them a problem?
well, I know that there are little bots that go around and they look for certain words, so I don't know if the link would
The
necessarily
link
do
is
it.
just a Google link.
Yeah. No, it should be fine. I just
Oh.
need to get over to that part of the computer to.
Yeah, just talk about how entertaining it is. That it's it's doesn't look as good as it was before, but it used to be really amazing. But it's got the desert in between the place. They didn't bother to water that area. They used to have grass in the in between zones, but it's still striking.
Well, you know what I'm going to do, and this is what I've been doing for at least since the beginning of the year, is making posts under each of the episodes of the show. So if you go to characterdriven.com, you'll find all of the stuff that I talk about on the show, including the links. I'll add them there. So I'll put this
Okay,
link
so somebody
to.
can go find it and explore around, zoom in and out, and count. I think I counted 8 lakes there.
Yeah, there's some other resources that you could find there, so that basically if you wanted to show people, let them go through the show,
And
they
then
could.
imagine what all you could do for a psyop there. You could put a piece of styrofoam and put a polar bear on it, and then show how it's turning the desert all around him,
You can do anything, and I
and
think.
say, "Look at what's happening with the South Pole." I don't know if polar bears at the South Pole. I think there's penguins there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are. There's got to be some polar bears down there. They're polar bears. They're
But
polar.
like penguins, yeah, they're gonna dive off into the water to go when whoever's turn it is to go off and eat. You
Right.
know, they got to get something to eat, so they got to swim a long distance in order to get something to eat. And because they can't eat on top of an iceberg or it's and I suspect the same way with polar bears that
Oops.
they how do they get food off of an iceberg or a what do you call it glacier? If there were glaciers, how would they get something to eat there? They can't. They got to get in the water to go find something to eat.
Well, I
Or
think
on
what
land.
they're saying is that the ice is breaking up, so therefore there's no place for the poor little polar bears to go. They're floating around in the middle of nothing.
But where would they otherwise be? Miles from food? No,
No.
would be where the food is.
Yeah.
And when the ice starts retreating in the spring, there's all sorts of goodies to eat. And so that's where you'd be, is where the ice is melting so you can get something to eat.
If only Al Gore would listen. I think he's bought up a lot of
But
real
but
estate.
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think he's managed to buy up a lot of real estate as a result. Can you imagine if you could have that kind of sway
Power.
and you told people to move away from the waterfront,
Talk about insider
evaluate,
trading.
and then he
I mean,
starts buying it up?
Prosecuted for insider trading.
I'm pretty sure that was what was happening, and he's done quite well off of the whole global warming thing.
But ads work. This shows how well ads work on emotion, because if you stop and looked at logic, you could figure it out about the polar bears. Why would they be walking on ice, for miles with nothing to eat?
Mm.
They in the spring when the ice is thawing, and you get you can go find goodies.
Yep.
More things to eat, and but think of how the emotions affect you. You see this poor polar bear on this ice cube floating in this unfrozen water.
Well, Peter Owens says they eat fish in the ocean, and there are not polar bears in the South Pole. I stand corrected. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I thought there was just penguins down there. Lots of penguins and some albatross, maybe. They have some strange patterns. Baby hatches and gets left for something like 6 months to sit there by himself until the parents come back. It's incredible. I don't know how long it is. Maybe it's 3 months, but it's incredible. It's a newly hatched baby who just is left there. But that's how they do it. It's the routine, kind of like how the penguins are. That the male incubates the egg. He puts it on his feet and then hangs his belly over his feet to keep the thing warm, and hangs out with the other males. And the wife leaves for months or whatever to go eat. Then comes back and then takes over. They swap off.
Well, there you go. And
They time them to hatch right. And apparently, one male with the egg on his feet, another male with his egg on his feet, and they stand side by side. And the babies start chirping inside before they're ready to, they pip and they're ready to hatch. So they all time the release at the same time so they can be safe. Isn't that cool?
it is very cool. You have introduced me to a lot of different animals as well. That's how animals function is often a good reflection of how we are meant to function, I suppose. If we were
it's still functioning. There's not a problem with
they are functioning.
The penguins at the South Pole.
Yeah.
And this the weirdest thing is that when the wife comes back, his mate, in this big flock of penguins, she knows which one's hers.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just like moms.
They know each other's chirp or something like that, and they supposedly mate for life, but I don't know if that's entirely true. But
Peter
they do,
for
a long distance relationship for sure.
Yeah, they do. Well, you were saying that monkeys mate for light as well. So Peter was saying that the ice cap on the North Pole recovered to 1977 coverage, which I have no idea what the 1977 coverage is.
It sometimes thaws out completely, sometimes doesn't. And it's you have icebergs floating around up there because there's no continents. It's just ice cubes.
I'd still want the sauce on that.
You have an icebreaker ship that goes through there to clear out the passage. What's it called? The Northwest Passage, is it?
Yeah, they're still doing that.
And they have icebreaker ships that go through and break up the ice, so that ships can go through, because that's something that normally happens.
Yeah, but again, if people can give their sauce for that, if they can give the background, when you say 1977 coverage, I think one of the things that I have a hard time with that.
Well, that's the end of the cold spell.
Yeah, but it's good to have a link or something so that people in the chat can see that. And I'm just going to encourage people to use those kind of skills. I know he thinks I'm dumb because I didn't know that there weren't polar bears in the South Pole, but I have some things that I'm not dumb about. So there's, we all have our areas.
And you know now. I now know. Things going on.
The great thing about being a youngest kid, and by far, is that I had a lot of experience with supposedly being the dumb kid, but I learned a lot. So, but I know that I learn a lot from you every time we do the show.
Anyway, we have had, global warming and global cooling and global warming. It goes through different phases. And I think it was 78 or 79 or whatever was the end of the cold spell. So it was getting colder and colder up until then. Then it started getting warmer and warmer, and then it leveled off, and it's starting to get cold again.
Well, when we were growing up, there was going to be...
Check out this winter. We've had something like 3 or 4 snows so far, and we went several winters without having any snow. We had it below freezing for several days in a row, and that hadn't happened since I moved here. So if you take an isolated year, but I'm sure that there's other things going on elsewhere that it snows, like in England. They had a whole lot of snow this year, and lots of different times that the kids were out of school for snow, and there was some time in there where they weren't getting any snow. So it's a pendulum that swings back and forth. It doesn't swing too far out of range, apparently.
I just thought it was funny when they were in in Switzerland. Where were they meeting? No, it wasn't Bern. But anyway, there was this sign that said that they were going to have to cancel the global warming conference because of the snow. It's actual.
Oh yeah, is that an actual sign?
Yeah. We'll see if I can find it.
Oh, if it's for real, it seems like that'd be a fun joke, but
Yeah, no, it was when they were. Where were they meeting? I'm just trying to remember. In Switzerland, in just a couple of
Sweden
months
or
ago, they were having their global warming conference. I'll try and find it for you. And
oh, that's good.
it could have
But
been a
there's
hoax.
been enough other real information that's come out that, like, why are they still working on it? To save face, or what is it? This and
Well,
why they
because
changed it to
it's an
climate change?
industry. If they were to now come out and say that global warming was a hoax, there are people around the world that would lose their jobs. It's a whole economy that is based on the concept. So, plus, as you say, they lose face, and there's an economy that is at
Yeah,
stake here.
the size. I think it is the biggest lie in the history that we know it. It's worldwide. That's a big, as big as 9/11, but I think it's worse because they're talking about some serious changes, like you can't use electricity anymore because of global warming. So
Yeah, we got to
we gotta
downsize.
do go out and live in tents now because of global warming.
Well, think of all the words that have come into our vernacular too, like your carbon footprint. You know,
That
20
makes
years
me
ago it would have.
nauseated. Seriously, I get very nauseated with that one.
Exactly. And yet people say it all the time. And if you don't say it, you're not part of the group. And so you've got to you've got to really
And
know what you're talking about.
sustainability. That's another sickening one. It's sustainable.
The greening of the planet. You know, we got to be sustainable. We got to green. I talked to Rosa Corey, and she was saying there's lots of trigger words, and that those are a few of them. Sustainable is definitely a trigger word. If you hear, oh, and smart, anything that's smart.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't understand what this deal is about the CO2 levels, and it's about the lowest it's been in history, not the highest. So and why then do they pipe CO2 into greenhouses to make plants grow faster?
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, it's just it's silly. So if we have a food shortage on this planet because it's overpopulated, why we would welcome more CO2, grow more food.
Well, they're already finding that a lot of the forests are actually growing at a very rapid rate. Now they're worried about that because, it could be too rapid in the
Well, they're
Amazon,
taking them.
places like that.
There's too much taking them down. They're trying to build whatever you call it, high-rise apartments in the jungle. And take people out of their tribes and put them in the projects. I'm just joking on that one, but I hope it's not happened yet. But seriously, I think they are trying to disrupt people's way of life. They can't just live in like they used to in their own little communities, however they wanted to live.
Yeah. I'm just looking for that. It's Davos. It was when they all were gathering in Davos.
Oh,
The sign. Okay, there's a sign that is covering up the Davos sign, and these guys are wearing these parkas in the background. It says scientists get buried in snow at Davos while lecturing on global warming.
yep, yep.
Just I'll put that up on the screen for folks to take a look at. Anyway, it wasn't
But
quite what
early
I
on with
thought.
all this nonsense, I went and looked at, like I said, looked up at my own location, and just compared for, tried to do it for every day of the year. What was the record high and the record low? And it was, like I say, most of them, 2/3 to 3/4 of them, the coldest one record, all-time record, was more recent than the hottest record.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll have a program that fiddles with the data files. That was Weather Underground for that one.
This is a good one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will post all of this at characterdriven.com. I will update the website and get this show on there, because what's happening is sometimes it is certain parts of it are taken down for this reason or that, and I've tried to minimize. Last time it was just because I showed a video from YouTube of the justification. I wasn't aware that anyone owned that, but apparently they do. So I'm putting all of the resources over there on characterdriven.com, and I've got it under Psyop Recovery Program, and then each of the shows, and then there's links to some of the other resources. So you can actually join the community there. And also, if you want to be in the room to be able to talk to Dr. Judy so you don't have to listen to me, you can get in touch with me on the website. You can PM me. And all you have to do is use your, I think I set it up so it would just be your email address and a username, and you're in, to make it as easy as possible. But it's just so that it's somewhat private. And that's all you have to do. And then you can come on the show. Next
what if there's a way for people to post their videos of the balloon experiment?
They can do that there too. That's what I want to have, a repository where we can do everything. So for those that may not have heard about the balloon experiment, you can revisit this video. It's probably about an hour ago. But what I'll do is I think I'll edit it out and have that as a separate little piece and kind of give the parameters. And maybe you could write it out so that it's clear for people in case they don't understand from the video.
Well, you listened to me when I was saying it, so it must be clear enough.
Well, it is clear enough, and I think that...
Well, we want to be able to print it out to the directions. But,
I think it might be fun to have something just that they could print out for people that aren't watching the show, like they could send it to a kid. You know, something easy.
Yeah, and have them try it. And if people each posted their own, that's somewhat of a what do you call it, like an honesty check. As if it was a debunker, they could rig up something bogus and say see. But then if everybody else came up with the right one, they would look like an idiot, wouldn't they?
Well, this is the fun thing about the website. I've tried to create it in such a way that it's little bit of a Facebook interface, in the sense that you can kind of chit-chat with each other, but you can upload things, you can share things, and it's a place to create community for people that are trying to learn. They're honestly trying to find out things.
Yeah, so if somebody, theirs came out, weird, but if they're honest about it, they say what they did and all, and then somebody could say, oh, here's where it might be a problem, or here's, and oh, okay, and then they go work on it again.
Well, I'll set up a form for that. I've got an FORUM that we can add that as one of the discussion topics on there, and make it formalize it a little bit. And yeah, it'll be fun. Have all the instructions there, and then we can post the videos there, and then take a look at them and notice things. And I'll direct you to it so you can have a boo and look at what people are up to.
That's cool.
Yeah, what fun.
Watch it'll be no effect. But I suspect there will be some kind of effect. I mean, if a hot air balloon takes you up for a ride in the gondola, I would think there'd be some kind of effect.
I would think so too. Well, you're the scientist here, and
you just have to make sure you can, regulate, do quality control on the amount of gas in each one. I won't say air, but whatever it is in each one, the same volume.
So it's the very fact that you're filling it up with your exhale of breath, your carbon dioxide.
Yeah, it should be a lot of carbon dioxide there, shouldn't it be?
There should be. So that's the very thing that you're experimenting with. So hopefully you have a lot of hot air.
Yeah. And then make sure that they're all the same temperature, so like the ones you filled up in the woods, or, away from, smoggy roads. And people who's, like in a nice park or a garden or something. Then make sure they're all warm, same temperature, and preferably a second story of a house, or maybe, an apartment building, you can toss them out the window. Hopefully it's not a windy day, because then they may take off somewhere.
Invite yourself in.
Toss them out at the same time, see what happens. I haven't done this. I just was thinking of this. And so you could, maybe try a pair of them out the window, and which is which, and then just see what you think is going to happen before you toss out all of your room full of balloons. Okay, as I call that, doing an experiment on the experiment. Then you tell your friend to get down there with the camera and get ready to make it go. Once you know what the balloons are going to do, like where they're going to waft off to, are they going to go up fast, or are they going to all go down fast, or whatever's going to happen. So you toss a pair out and then see what's going to happen. Then you do more.
Nice. Okay, well, and let's be thinking about some more experiments that we could do. We could do the one about the desert. We could recreate that environment as well. I think you could probably create a closed environment where you add, remember terrariums? That would actually work quite well for condensation.
Oh, about something getting cold. But that's it's or a cold night. Like I knew it was a clear night a couple of nights ago, so I went and covered up my blueberries because I knew the temperature was going to get sucked out up to the sky.
Well, I remember when I was younger and terrariums were a big thing. You could create a climate within this glass sphere so that you could grow things inside in the same way that you could outside. And so you'd have the same elements like the evaporation cycle. And it would be releasing.
Oh, it's a sealed one.
Yeah, basically. Well, you have a little bit of air somewhere. I'll have to take a look at that again. But all I remember was
it
that
doesn't pressurized or vacuumed.
Theoretically, you don't have to water things.
And you have something that breathes air that's walking around in there.
Well, I would think the plants need a little bit of air, don't they?
No, they would want carbon dioxide more, wouldn't they? So you need something that makes carbon dioxide that likes the oxygen that comes out of the plants.
Sure. So
like some little critters that walk around in there.
Oh, I see. Yeah, throw in
like
a few
maybe
critters.
Some toads or something. Would that satisfy?
This is a whole other experiment. We're going to have to do this next week. I have to do some research into terrariums. And
see what you can put in there. I don't know about how crickets are, but I do know they suffocate if you put them in a jar, so they must breathe something. So
you got to have, as far as I remember,
crickets and maybe toads, little toads.
Yeah, you have a little hole on the side, like it's a blown glass thing, and it's just a hole. And I just remember putting my hand through and planting things in there.
There's plastic ones I've seen where it's like a spaceship-looking thing, like a flying saucer. They come apart halfway from the top to the bottom. So you take apart, arrange them at all, then seal it up with a rubber gasket.
There's so many things to explore, and we've been here for now. I hate to be the moderator, but it's we're done. We're done. 3 and a bit hours,
but I'm excited to see who can come up with some, the balloon experiment. See what results we get.
Yeah, we got to spread this around, you guys. Got to let people know.
A cold day without much wind. That's a good day to do it on.
Okay, and we've got some of those coming along. Don't forget to set your clocks forward.
Oh, that's right. We gotta wake up early tomorrow.
Spring forward. And that's only for certain areas around the world. If you're in Italy, I have no idea what you do there. But I do know in my neck of the woods, we would be springing forward. So you get less sleep. I don't know. Most people stay up till 2 a.m., do all the setting of the clocks.
Yeah, it takes them all night to set all the clocks.
That's right. Oh, it does. Some people still have those VCRs that blink 12.
Flash. You have microwave ovens, you have coffee makers, then of course you have your clocks, your VCRs. What else is there? Computers?
In the old days. I use a Bodum. So most of my stuff just updates, which is kind of scary. It's Big Brother does it for me.
Yep. Phone
Thanks,
home.
Big Brother.
Phone home.
Yeah. It's so convenient, though. All these smart devices.
Ooh.
Right? I have a friend, you walk into his house and he just tells everything to start up and and it's really creepy being in there.
That would be bothersome because you wonder who else is getting the signal and recording it.
Well, and what you're saying, somebody's on their coffee break listening in, so it's going to be really interesting.
When you're going on vacation, okay, check.
Yeah, well, I know I do a little psyops there too. Every time I go near it, I say, well, good thing we have this big, what do you call those dogs? I can't even remember now. The ones that...
Mastiff?
Yeah, but let's call it a mastiff. Good thing we have the dog trained to kill. Yeah, say that really close.
Oh, pit bulls.
Yeah, good thing the pit bull's in the yard. Let's bring the pit bull in the house.
Yeah, don't forget to bring the pit bull in.
Yeah. And,
for our friendly pit bull.
Put the alligators away, okay? Don't forget to feed them. That would be fun.
And be sure to set the trigger in front of the door that shoots whoever comes in.
Yeah, don't forget to call the NRA. Yeah, make sure you renew our membership.
Yep, so that covers our automatic fire guns.
Yeah.
Get
Billy Bob to come over and look after the house while we're gone.
We're getting silly here. This is fun, though.
I have a thing you'll appreciate this when you see the video later. It says global warming, shrinking goats.
Don't know what that is.
You'll have to read that. It's in the same Davos global warming thing. It's part of that.
I just don't get it. Why this isn't dead and buried by now. It's like, this is an IQ test.
Well, the goats are shrinking. That's when we really start to pay attention.
Oh, okay. Shrinking goats.
When you got the goats shrinking. Okay, folks, I'm going to play the extra, and I really appreciate your time. I know that it's hours on end that we spend here, and we could go on, and we probably will. Let's see what I've got. Okay. I'm going to play the extra. Going to say goodbye?
Bye.
That's goodbye. See you next week. See you on characterdriven.com.
One of the initial steps of the military Psyop program is directed toward the hostland military establishment itself. Since the military represents the government to the populace, their actions and attitudes can do much to create a favorable image of that government in the minds of the people. A soldier's attitude goes a long way toward implementing an effective military Psyop program. Among the support elements needed are the light mobile printing team with its printing and editorial shelf. Also needed is a radio team to support existing radio stations, particularly in the back country. An audiovisual vehicle will help to increase the effectiveness of face-to-face communications. And a loudspeaker team will support tactical operations.